downstairs in the catch-all chest of drawers.
So it was open season on it?
Got a ton of them. Okay. Since 5 p.m., the Board of Education has been in closed session to discuss the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the district or legal counsel for the district. Can I please have a motion to come out of closed session? All in favor? Aye. Okay, welcome to special meeting of the Board of Education for board planning session. Roll call, please.
Board members present: Terry Fielden, Susan Price, Mike Yench, Jackie Romberg, Susan Crotty, Kristen Fitzgerald, and Donna Wonke.
Okay, we have public comment. I have no cards or any member of the public here tonight. All right. Then we'll move on to the consent agenda. Can I have a motion for the consent agenda?
I move to approve 5.01, the personnel report.
We have a motion and a second. Roll call, please, Ms. Bell.
Price?
Yes.
Romberg?
Yes.
Fielden?
Yes.
Fitzgerald?
Aye.
Crotty?
Yes.
Wonke?
Yes.
Yench?
Aye. Motion carries. Okay, on to the purpose of tonight's meeting, which is the strategic blueprint discussion. And since it's your show, Mr. Bridges, you can go ahead.
Great. If I could just take a moment before we get into that. I shared some pretty sad information earlier today with the board and cabinet, and just wanted to take a minute and just reflect on the impact that Ross Marino had on this district and this community. Ross was active in our community and our school district, especially for a number of years, supporting groups like Hurrah, as well as a number of other initiatives. This time I don't have any information about arrangements or anything, but I'll certainly pass that information along. But we certainly will miss Russ and his impact on all of us. So just wanted to make sure that I shared that with the community, that we're going to miss Russ. So. Yes.
And I'm so grateful that the district was able to acknowledge him and all of his work with the 203 award and all the great things. We don't know our timing, so
it's
awesome.
kind of just for me, just celebrating all the work that he's done. As I look to see if there's any information about arrangements online, that's exactly what I came across, all the awards and recognition that he'd had over the last few years, newspaper articles and other publications recognizing and honoring the work that he had done with the Hurrah group in our district. So, yeah, it's kind of a touching tribute to be able to look back on all the positive things that he's done for our community. So.
And when we do learn about arrangements, we'll send an arrangement to the visitation from the board in the district.
Sure.
That sounds like a good idea, right?
Okay, now on to our discussion for this evening. This is, I know the administration as well as the board is really looking forward to the conversation about our priorities and goals moving forward. For tonight's conversation, just in terms of a rough outline, a rough discussion, this ties back to a July 19 and July 20, 2013 planning session that the Board of Education had right in the midst of the Future Focus 203 Community Engagement Initiative, where the Board of Education heard reports and information on each of the community engagement sessions that had taken place, and as a board participated in the same activities that our community did, and was able to identify priorities that eventually became a part of the strategic plan. Tonight we're going to provide you an update on the priorities identified by the Board of Education and contained within the Focus 2020 strategic blueprint. We'll take a little bit of time to review and discuss the planning calendar for board meetings for the 15-16 school year, and then have conversation and identify new issues that have emerged that weren't previously identified in our planning sessions or by the strategic plan. And then throughout, hope we have a robust, positive conversation about the priorities and the goals for the district moving forward. So with that, there's a number of things that went into the development of our strategic plan and our priorities as a district. And the ingredients are listed on the slide that you see there. I just referenced the two-day planning sessions back in July of 2013. And contained in the background material for the board and for the community are some of the outcomes of priorities that were identified by the Board of Education during that two-day session. And then in red, what I've done is a little bit of a crosswalk over the strategic plan, where you can see the priorities that have been identified and the relationship to commitments within the strategic plan. And then, as everyone recalls, we had our Future Focus community engagement sessions. We had 12 sessions where our community provided their input on beliefs and hopes and priorities for the district. District leadership team also had identified a number of a lot of work that was already underway and was utilizing district resources, both human resources and other resources, to complete the work. There's a number of things contained within our priorities in a strategic plan that were legal requirements or state mandates. For example, the implementation of new standards in English language arts and math were never really identified as a board priority or anything that emerged significantly as a community engagement topic, but we were required to really look at our standards because the Illinois state standards had changed to be aligned with the Common Core. And then there were some things that were already underway that we had to complete along with the new things that were identified for our priorities. As you look through the slides, just a key on how to review each slide and how to review each commitment. The first number identifies the strategic focus area within the blueprint. The letter is just the identifier within each strategic focus area. The second number is an anticipated year in which the target will be fulfilled or full implementation will be in place, translated over to previous meetings, short-term, intermediate-term, long-term goals. Tonight we're going to focus on the ones that identify BOE in the right-hand corner. So we won't touch or talk on every one of the commitments that are listed here. Our focus for this evening, since this is a board planning session and board conversation, will be on those identified in the lower right-hand corner with the BOE, because those were identified during that 2013 either as a priority that fit in the table or emerged as additional conversation by the board during some of our work activities during those two meetings. We'll stop after each of the three sections for conversation and questions, and we can go back and touch on any of the other commitments that we don't hit specifically during our presentation. And the presentation this evening will be shared by all of the members of the administration. Each of the commitments within our priorities are owned by a cabinet member, a cabinet representative, who serves as the champion for that particular commitment in leading the work for completion. So we'll go ahead and get started with that unless there's any questions before we proceed. Okay. We'll begin with all-day kindergarten and Dr. Hester.
All right. I think everybody knows that we have all-day kindergarten fully implemented in all of our elementary schools. And if you'll recall, one of the last presentations that Mr. Waranga gave on our assessment, we are reporting that we have demonstrated growth in both literacy and math. Most of our students are choosing all-day kindergarten as their option instead of the half-day program. And we have a reported stakeholder satisfaction. However, our metrics for measuring all-day kindergarten will be fully implemented in the 15-16 school year. So just if you'll remember, for literacy, we're really focusing on that ISO screener and on our Pontus and Pinnell assessment. In math, we're focusing on our district assessments, plus a social and emotional learning assessment for that expectation. And then also, Mr. Waranga and Mrs. Ryan and I have been working on measures for parent satisfaction and looking at the transitional or the success of the transition from kindergarten through first grade.
The next commitment we'll look at is 116C. And Kane Osborne is the owner from Cabinet on this particular commitment. This was identified by the board on the Saturday, the 7/20 of our two-day session as an area for continual review and continuous improvement. Kane?
Okay, and you can see on the slide the steps that have been achieved so far, but just to recap, and some of this has been covered in a board presentation that we made, I believe, last fall. Since then, to add to that, we have implemented surveys in the fall, the winter, and the spring for varsity athletes at both schools. We have over 500 completed surveys. We have met to review both the data that came from that and the process. It's all brand new, and really looking back on it, if we were to look at it again. We might call this a bit of a pilot year for a couple of reasons. One is because we're vetting out the survey questions. After the fall survey, we realized that there were a number of questions that weren't clear, that needed to be revised, and that weren't getting at what we wanted. Secondly, we are creating a baseline of data. We had nothing to compare our data to in terms of what it was showing us, so we'll really see this first year as a baseline against which we'll compare future years' responses. So we did make improvements to the winter survey, and we implemented winter and spring surveys. The next steps that are coming up are one other caveat is the ADs, which is the athletic directors and the activities directors, have met after each season to do this, but to also talk about how is this data best used going forward. And right now we're using it very much in goal setting and program review with the coaches, between the coaches and the ADs, but also to look at the whole athletics and activities program because that's where the data has the biggest N, so to speak. When we're just doing some varsity teams, the N's not big enough to necessarily tell us a lot. However, we did 500 surveys this year. We have a target of at least 1,000 surveys for next year. One thing that'll help a lot, frankly, is every high school student having a Chromebook in their hands will make it a lot easier to do the logistics for the survey taking. Next steps will be on August 31st. The head coaches and activity sponsors are meeting to review the data together, to talk about whether or not the indicators for success are ones that they feel they want to continue with. Just like in Rising Star, the teams review those indicators and determine if there are other indicators they want to adopt. And they talk about also, we're going to be doing breakout sessions where coaches in sports that have come back with some data that's particularly strong are going to lead breakout sessions on what they're doing with their teams or their activities that help them achieve that indicator successfully. So it's some professional development between our coaches and our sponsors, which frankly has never happened before. And one note is the first year before we started this, when we had all of the head coaches and sponsors together, they had never ever been in one room together from both the schools. And so we're going to be revisiting that and really using this as a lever for great professional development among our coaches and our sponsors. So that's what we're looking forward to, and we look forward to come back to you with data of at least 1,000 surveys completed in the next year.
Okay. Yep.
Oh, going back to the kindergarten survey. Are we doing more than one survey a year, or are we just doing one on the kindergarten?
We'll start with obviously an initial surveys that will happen in the fall. And then one of the things that we've discussed right now is repeating every other year versus every year.
Repeating the survey every year?
Yeah, repeating surveys for parent satisfaction and then for the transition from kindergarten to first. And that's just so that we are collecting the data and not constantly surveying.
Okay. And then, Jen, just looking forward on both surveys, both the athletic and the kindergarten, when would we expect to see some results on that? What's the timing?
We have to talk about when we'd be ready to make a board report on the first year. One of the challenges just the first year was simply that we did change some of the questions from fall to winter. But we could certainly report on the data when we find the right moment for a board report or otherwise. It's just really up to us to talk about it in terms of board planning.
Jen.
And for kindergarten, we could either report incrementally, which would be collecting the data that we need to collect in the beginning of the year, and then toward the end of the year, or we could just report back more toward the end of the year. We'd have either choice.
Okay. Next will be 216A. During the planning meeting, the board identified student achievement as one of its immediate priorities, and we're addressing that through our school improvement process.
Okay. With Tim Waringa particularly and Molly Farmer, we chose 2 years ago to adopt the state-structured Rising Star school improvement process for every school in the district. You can see the steps that have been taken there, and one of the fruits has been the monthly school improvement report that's been delivered to the board. I'd say, other than what you see on here, the biggest, and I'd ask my colleagues to chime in, I'd say plus that's come out of this is the level of collaboration that's come among the principals at DLT at the monthly meetings, where they collaborate on a regular structured basis over what's in their plan and what tasks are in their plan to help them achieve the indicators. Before, when there were 22 potentially different school improvement plans and processes, that was difficult to achieve. The other thing that's occurred that's noted here is that every cabinet member has been given a liaison for 3 to 4 schools to work with the principals on their Rising Star plan. Working with them might be an overstatement in as much as to coach, to get feedback, to ask critical questions on a regular basis to see how can the district support the schools in their school improvement processes and work. And I think you've all been witness both in December when we bring to you the executive summary of all the schools' plans of what's in there, and on the monthly basis when you get the school-by-school reports.
Next, we're going to go to 316. Yep, go ahead. Do we want to, I initially thought we would do questions as we went through section, but we can go. It looks like you want to go commitment by commitment, so that's fine. So, Mike.
Just real quickly, the one note said, where'd it go? Regularly review the work of the Rising Star team with their parents. What does that look like? Is it, the principal just briefs the home and school, there's newsletters, or?
Wow. Home and school or SFCP, depending on the particular structure that they have at that school. SFCP teams have actually been involved pretty regularly and extensively in carrying out tasks in the plan. So the expectation is they're communicating it to home and school or SFCP or both, depending on their structure. And if you look at the communications with parents, the principals are regularly referring to activities that they're undertaking, and those activities are really tasks that are in the plan.
2 questions. I feel like I remember hearing some dialogue at the superintendent roundtable thing that was at Naperville North, where they were presenting the plan about for that big multi-group plan for ISB and the IASBO and all that. I can't remember the
Vision
code word name
2020.
of it. Vision 2020. And I feel like I remember hearing them say something like they're moving away from Rising Star. Is that it true that in the state they're kind of moving away from that? And do you see any concerns with that? Or is that because it was tied to NCLB? I mean, where do you know?
We'll let Tim speak to that.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think the reference was in the report cards, just the standard, look at who meets the qualifications for NCLB.
Very well.
Yeah, so the Rising Star is no longer tied to being mandatory for those schools, but instead the process is still live and open, and more schools are joining it just because of the process itself.
Right.
Okay,
So the
so
superintendent that spoke to it, I think in
Yeah.
their district, I think it was, I can't remember who it was. I vaguely remember the comment. It was a smaller district, I recall, I think. We have not had that type of experience. What we've had here is a much more collaborative type of experience, where all 22 of our schools are operating on the same platform, same way, and can exchange information, collaborate with each other, and share ideas. So we found it to be, just as a point of reference process, very powerful for us.
There's no question that everybody doing the same thing is certainly great, and it sounds like the process is super collaborative. I wasn't, it like raised a red flag to me because I thought, oh, great, wouldn't that be great if the state changed what they wanted while we were getting it all fully implemented. So anyways, my second question was, when we reviewed the draft commitments with you, I have written down in my notes on this bullet on the Rising Star SIP process. It was a little broader. It said implement a common research-based school improvement process, but that's the SIP. I have written down including gaps in achievement that maximizes continuous student growth and achievement, including gaps in achievement, as like a locator for work that was going on in this regard. I see in other areas that we have addressed that question, but I know that for the most part, that is a part of the SIP process. So I was wondering about the placement of the bullet under the diversity action plan as opposed to the Rising Star, given that it really is the part of the work of the Rising Star committees.
Oh, I think you're absolutely right. It could very well be placed here. That's an important part of our school improvement process, is for our principals and their school improvement teams to identify the gaps that exist within their buildings and to develop strategies and tasks to which they're going to address those gaps. So I agree with you. These are just parts of, in terms of what's on the screen.
Well, yeah, right.
Yeah.
I just had it written down as it residing more there and that type of a commitment in
I would
terms of
agree with you.
achievement.
I would agree with you.
Okay.
Okay, so our next is going to be 316D with enrollment projections, and Kitty's going to start us off with that. This really came out of the board's discussion in 2013 about all-day kindergarten and understanding the impact that all-day kindergarten in all 14 of our elementary schools may have.
Well, that's right, and we know that we had a board presentation in March about the report that Dr. Crawford brought to us. We're continuing to use that report to compare just where we are, even in our summer enrollment this year, so that we can look and see if things are playing out the way that one of his models suggested that they might. We're using this certainly, as we always do, for staff or any projections that we have or have had for enrollment projections, building utilizations, and making sure that we have our resources aligned to the right building sites. And Bob has continued to work with Dr. Coffrin, and I know wants to talk a little bit about the work that he's done this summer.
Just that it's our intent to continue as more birth data becomes available, so another cohort of students, cohort of babies born, as that data becomes available from the state of Illinois, we work with Dr. Coffrin and we work with the Illinois Department of Health, their office in Chicago, and we're able to take a new year of data and kind of load that into the model to help us 5 years later for kindergarten. So we've been doing that as recently as 2 weeks ago, and look forward to that continuing. We think it's going to help us keep refining the model as we move forward.
Just
Bob, how do the move-ins and move-outs in our community help? I see a huge turnover on my street, so it makes me wonder kind of how do you keep up with that?
Yes, we do need to be vigilant about that. And in a time when, for years, I think the turnover hasn't been what it had been, and it does make me wonder, living in town, when did that kind of turn around? I've also noticed more for sale signs. That's not fit into Dr. Coffrin's model in this way, because what he's talking about is who's there, who's born. He does look at census data as well, but we need to be sure that we're keeping an eye on that along the way as well, because that could certainly change things too. We're aware of that.
Kitty has something to add.
And we do that through our centralized enrollment process. And so on a weekly basis, we're reviewing actual enrollment. We know daily what our actual enrollment is. And even though it seems every summer there's a flurry of activity and we think, oh my gosh, we're getting a rush, we're going to see our enrollment go way up, by the time the summer ends, we're just about where we thought we were going to be. We might have pockets in one area or another that are a little higher or a little lower, but we're right on track. Maureen was just sent me an update from where we are today, and we're right on track for what we projected we would be for next year.
One of the strengths of Dr. Coffrin's model is that it enables us yearly with live, real information to be able to update it, and then his ratios and whatnot that are contained within that model are changed based off of the real information that's in there. So by September 30th, the end of September, is going to be an important date for us because we'll use actual enrollment on September 30th to update the model.
Bob, there was some direct discussion on housing turnovers from the report. So will he go back and look at that information again to check that? Because as I recall in the South Side area, especially, and I recall because it's my area, but they talked about more diversity in that area of the city than anywhere else, and that would have to come from housing flips. So is this something that he goes back and looks at to update accordingly?
Yeah, kind of the key to how his projections work. He does look at history. He looks at number of babies born 5 years ago in these zip codes that we serve moving forward. But he also has a factor that he determines that helps identify, okay, if there were this many third graders at this school, how many fourth graders, based on our history, would we expect there to be? That formula is re-looked at as we go along so that if changes happen, instead of it being this multiplier, it might become that multiplier. So as we move forward, we do expect to refine those. So in that way, that will adjust.
And next, we're going to move to 416A. Ongoing communication and community relations was identified as a priority by the Board of Education back in 2013. We have a couple of commitments that are trying to address that. Michelle?
Yes. So 416A was to complete my department, and I've been here now a year in June. So that's, check that box. Consolidated the webmaster position. We had a webmaster for a while. She retired, and we created we consolidated the media specialist position to become a communications manager, and that's just worked out really, really great for our department. Jen Hannon's been a wonderful resource to the district. And we saved a full-time employee in the process of that, too. So my department's actually smaller, but we're nimble and we're quick. And we also developed a communications governance model. So basically, that creates the foundation for all of our two-way communication with the district and our stakeholders. And it also paves the way for our commitment 418A action steps.
Which will lead right into 416B, which is an extension of communications that's updating our communication through the website. One of the things that we learned throughout the process that we used as a district to identify communication needs with home and school was that the website continues to be the place where parents want to go for information. So it's important to update the website so that the information is easily found. So Michelle can also speak a little bit about the website.
Sure. Right at the beginning of the summer last year, in fact, July 1st, we went live with a newly revamped website. We have 23 websites. Each school has their own. Then we have the main district website, and that's done through SchoolWire's content management system. And so our office handles that and working alongside the webmasters at the individual schools to update those. And so the way we did that was that all the schools have their own unique identity and logo, but they're all, if you went to a River Woods or you went to Naperville North, you would know that it's a District 203 school. We wanted to make sure that the brand had cohesiveness amongst all of them. So if you were on one, you would recognize that it's a District 203 school. And we also launched a mobile application last summer for iPhone and Android. I think we're at about 3,000 plus downloads on that. We also run monthly webmaster trainings here at the training center downstairs with all of our school webmasters, just to teach them about what's new in the content management system. We have, some ideas about what kind of content we want to put, how to help them procure content for their websites and things like that. And we also procured a service called Site Improve, which is a really great tool that allows us to one-stop make changes throughout all 23 websites instead of having to go and look for the spelling errors or the broken links or things like that. This way we're able to do it a lot quicker and find things that we may not have been able to find otherwise.
Are we going to be doing a community report or annual report?
Yes,
Yeah.
we are. And that's going to be talked about soon, but I can go ahead and jump to it. We're going to be doing it biannually, so it's going to be next summer. We'll be working on the next one.
And are they going to be digital or printed as well and sent out to
Both.
the community? Great.
Other questions from the commitments and priorities that we've just discussed, or those that we skipped over and go back to in the first section?
I was just wondering, one of them was on teacher mentor program. Now that we've been doing it for a while, I read the notes, but if you could talk about stuff you've learned, maybe changes, improvements, or, I can tell you're very happy with it, so.
Yeah,
a little more color to it.
Sure. Jane, you want to go ahead and touch on that?
This year, we gathered a lot of data from both our mentees and our mentors, and overall, what we put in place was well received by both our mentors and our mentees and our building principals. And so this year, our plan will look very similar to last year. We have differentiated a lot of their learning, which was great feedback we got this year. It was in the past that every educator participated in the similar professional learning. This year, we really collaborated with student services. We collaborated with Marion Freewas-Flamin, our Director of Language Acquisition, to really differentiate some of that learning. And so that was one of our kind of big takeaways, that we need to continue that and continue differentiating it even greater. So now when we look at some of our special teachers, such as music, that we will have different learning for them as well. So far, our feedback is good. We are looking to implement the same model this year, and we will continue to gather that feedback.
I had a question, and I didn't know where your break was going to be, and it actually goes back to Kane's comments on the coach, on the athletic and activity plan. So I guess what I wanted to make sure you and administration group were satisfied with, that the coaches were being evaluated on a timely basis, and that where constructive criticism or whatever needed to be done, or remediation, but not quite remediation. Things needed to be done. Surveys are surveys. Some people participate, some people don't.
Right.
But what I had heard, the whole review process wasn't really formalized in years past. Some people did it, some people didn't do it. But the athletic director was what we refer to as that after-school principal, and that the buck stops with that person at both schools, both of the high schools. And I just wanted to make sure I understood what that whole process looked like and that it was being done.
Okay. This is not addressing the formal evaluation process, but I can go back and review. My understanding is formal evaluations are being conducted for the head coaches.
Okay, I'm sorry. ADs and principals met with review criteria process. I thought that was a part of that, so
Yeah.
sorry.
They do go over the criteria. The indicators of success are actually constructed by the coaches in collaboration with the ADs. And when I say coaches, I also mean varsity activity sponsors. And they do use those indicators and then the survey responses to construct goals for the coaches as appropriate during the year, and then to review at the end of the year.
But that whole review is being done. I don't need to sideline the whole conversation.
Yes.
That review
The whole
process is
formal
being done.
review that's been in place is being done, and that
So as
is
long as
being
you're
included in it.
satisfied it's being done,
Yes.
I didn't.
That is
And my
the case.
question on a part that didn't have BOE, print optimization, enrollment projections, bear with me 1 second. Oh, goodness, hold on a second. Oh, Student Activity Fund, related and not related. It seemed to be when I read through this, it wasn't that I or anyone else suggested there was anything inappropriate. It was just used differently at all the schools, which I think is, we go back to the gravel in the baseball fields at the two high schools, or what happens at a junior high. You would hope there would be some consistency.
One of the things that Brad Kaufman identified when he came on was that we didn't have a clear, consistent policy manual for activity fund use, and we're required to do so by law. So what we did is help develop that so that there are clear expectations for how activity funds should be managed by each of our sites.
Perfect. Thank you.
Just a question on the printing. So, it's something that comes up from time to time, but the last bullet that you have there under printing, you're going to start looking for ways to save money, or you're going to be tracking ways that we are saving money?
I'll take that one. We're going to be tracking actual savings dollars. And the way that's done is there's a back-end monitoring tool that we put in place that tracks the amount and type of printing and the users and the locations. And every building leader has access to those reports now. And that's a great increased visibility that they didn't have before. And that helps them incorporate some behavior changes in their buildings to change maybe the type of printing and the frequency. But now what we're doing is we're going through and optimizing each building's type of printers and location and number of printers and what type of jobs are printed locally versus the print shop. And that's going on this year, and we're almost done going through all the buildings to suggest those optimizations. Once that's done, I think by the end of this school year, we'll be able to compare actuals from last year versus the actuals this year and see the impact of what we've done.
So coupled with that is the use of the computers that we're going to have at the high school now. Do you anticipate that we'll be able to put more information in PDF format versus print format? I mean, I get the fact that you're going to upgrade to printers and so forth, but if the idea is to reduce cost, it would seem we'd want to part of it is taking some of the equipment away to help reduce paper usage and so forth. So what's the ultimate direction?
Well, the ultimate direction would be to print less and only print when necessary. We do expect an influx of printing by students who have more devices now than they used to, but we think that's going to be a temporary bump in the road, and then it will taper off and go back down. But actually, the behavior changes we're looking to make at each school suggest that print only when needed and less printing and more online work. And a lot of the systems we're using now are online, and they submit work online as opposed to print. So I think we're going to see a general direction of downward trend in both angles. Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Okay. The next section represent what we've titled Current Areas of Focus. These are commitments and priorities that we anticipate will be expending a lot of both human and other resources on over the course of this coming school year in areas of priorities of work for us. And one of those areas is 116D, and this was identified by the board, by the state, through the identification or through the adoption of next generation science standards, and then also through our Future Focus 203 process, but also an administrative-led initiative. And Jane Willard is our cabinet owner there, and she'll speak a little bit to that.
This past year, this team really engaged in research and collecting data. So we have a small leadership team that consists of leaders from Learning Services, our high schools, and our elementary and junior highs. And what we're currently doing right now is really researching best practice. What are other school communities doing? And we're researching our current state. When we think about our current state, we think about what is it that all students are engaged in, what are the offerings we have for those students that have a high interest in the STEM field, and then also what type of extracurricular activities are we offering our students. And so that's kind of been some of the work that's happened this past year. This coming up to this school year, we are going to be gathering a larger team that consists of more classroom teachers, more administrators, to really look at our current state, and then from there say where do we want to go? What is our vision? And we have to do this in alignment with our science curriculum. We can't let that sit outside of that, because in some instances, such as K-5, we know time is of essence. And so we have to look at how do we incorporate STEM into our science curriculum that we will also be developing for all students. And then, of course, what type of extracurricular activities would we offer within our schools. We also then will have that plan, and we will communicate that to Board of Education and stakeholders for feedback, and then we will move forward from that feedback.
And since you referenced science, let's go out of order for just a minute and skip ahead to 118A, the K-12 science curriculum, which is identified by the board as a priority, came up through Future Focus. And then, as I'd mentioned earlier, with next generation science standards coming on, we had to really look at our curriculum and program, Jane.
Mm-hmm. So this year, of course, we completed our chemistry curriculum maps for full implementation for this upcoming school year. Actually, in August, all of our chemistry teachers will engage in professional learning on those curriculum maps and assessments. So they will be doing that in a few weeks here. The 612 curriculum team also presented those maps, the year-long maps, at County Institute. So even though not everyone in 612 is implementing curriculum next year, they're very aware of what is undergoing right now within those year-long maps. And then those curriculum teams at 612 will define those units this year, identify resources, and also start that assessment process. Our K-5 team will be established this year. They will start researching, and they will start creating some of those year-long maps and really aligning that to the next generation science standards. Then for this year, we will also be looking at what is the professional learning need for our 612 teachers so that they are equipped to implement new curriculum next year.
Okay. We'll go back to 116E then. This was identified through conversation about really looking at the school year, how we use the school year, specifically focused on summer learning. And this is, I would say, one of the areas in the past couple of years we've really taken great strides. And I'm going to ask Kane to speak to summer school.
Okay, so the bullet points, not to spoiler alert, but that's basically what the summer school report will be, the outline for the summer school report you'll get in October when we bring it forward as we usually do with full data. But the short version is that We had brought to you from a summer school committee a set of recommendations that you approved, and we're basically going lockstep in executing those recommendations, which included a lot about increasing access to summer school for students, particularly the students who needed it, who would benefit from it the most. So that's how we have expanded transportation and food service for the first year till the full complement. And I think the round number is over 1,000 students access transportation to summer school, which was good. And because of the numbers, we anticipated, rightly so, to have 2 sites instead of just one K-5 site. That then thereby expanded the Park District partnership we have, and both the Park District programs were full. In fact, the Park District program expanded their ceiling because of the enrollments. And again, you'll notice at the bottom where I say final stats should bear out a substantial part of our increase accounted for by free and reduced students. I don't have the numbers yet, but based on the number of kids who received waivers to the camp and the number of kids who we think we final numbers for waivers for tuition, that the increases were disproportionately free and reduced kids, which is good. That is exactly what we aim to do. Other things along the way, because it wasn't only about that type of access, was offering programming for students that along the enrichment path that wasn't there, that was enticing. So we offered the Code HS computer programming, which oversubscribed, and the Project Lead the Way component, which also over-enrolled. We had wait for both of those. So the last piece that I'll note is that we wanted to make summer school as much like regular school in terms of making sure that all of our kids were as proximate to each other as they should be according to the law, really, and what it means to be in the least restrictive environment. But one of the things that was identified is having the supports in place to do that. So not only did we have ESY at the same site as the K-5 general ed as much as possible and at the high school, but we also put in place some, as you can see, a counselor, a social worker, a psych at some sites, to be, or an LBS in some cases, to be available for those kids who might have IEPs but didn't need ESY. They needed to access regular general ed summer school, but they just needed the supports that they might get during the year. And so we put that in place, and we'll have a full detailed report on how those things went when we come to you in the fall. Oh, next steps finally is just consistent with the recommendations. We have a committee that's been working on developing an electronic learner profile that would follow a student from regular year into summer school. We're going to pilot that this summer. Finding the right platform that meets all of the needs that the committee identified is very difficult without starting a whole nother application, which is not the preference of anybody. So we're working on that. We've also, in collaboration with Learning Services, hired a part-time project manager to align the curriculum in the summer with the newly revised curriculum in math and language arts that we have in place during the year, because that's one of the identified blind spots. Is they were going in the summer, but we had no guarantee that what they were getting in the summer was aligned with what we expected during the year. So the project manager will be located in Learning Services to help make that happen. And the final thing is, hopefully, if we get it right, pilot a 6-week summer school for K-8. Right now it's 3 weeks for K-8, and we'd like to pilot a 6-week option for families and to see how enrollment goes. And of course, to get access to those students who benefit the most from it.
Kristen?
The summer school report is always really exciting. Thank you, Kane. It's really gratifying to see the different things that we're working on. I have a question about the K-8 curriculum and assessments. Do you intend to ever try to estimate the impact of what summer school means for the kids? So you're getting closer by, connecting all the dots with the curriculum and the assessments and the pilot the piloting of the electronic learner profile. But are we going to try to look at that at all, or no?
I mean, I would anticipate that if we successfully put in place an aligned curriculum, that we would look at the next step would be, and the assessments that go with it. Why don't you chime in, Tim?
Sure. We've started trying to make Mastery Manager, which is where we do our district benchmark assessments, available in the summer program, and work through the issues of infinite campus integration to be able to do that. But we're having some success, so we should be able to take a look at how course-to-course mastery matches up.
That's great.
If the section's filled that you talked about, the Code HS and the Project Lead the Way, are we looking to open more of those sections then next year?
We're going to do our best. With those new courses, it was more of a challenge with Project Lead the Way, we only have a certain number of teachers who are trained in that curriculum, and it's a very specific training. There's another module that we haven't done still that we can do, so our goal next year will be to do 2 different modules, particularly for those kids who have now taken flight in space. But then we'll be out of modules that we can offer in the summer right now. With Code HS, we have to get an additional teacher trained. We also have to do some assessment on how it went. It wasn't perfect, and so we have to work with Code HS on what we would do and to sequence things. But we would look in the future as we can train more staff to open more sections of that.
And then can you tell us a little bit more about the electronic learner profile? I think I asked that last time we talked about this too, but that's very intriguing for even moving beyond summer school.
Yes, and embedded in the goal is that it would be something that eventually would be used beyond summer school, and summer school is kind of a little lab for it. So a team of a committee, and I could share the names with you at some point, came together and went through a process to identify those things that we started with the perspective of a summer school teacher. What would I best need to know to help a kid off the ground running in the short time that I have them in summer school, and came up with a list of about 20 items, actually. And then we kind of narrowed that down and prioritized that list, and that's the list of items that we want to put in this profile so that when a summer school teacher opens up their roster, they can access that immediately. The challenge is, and Tim can attest to this, is that all of this information sits in very different places, and to get it into one place that already exists somewhere is a challenge. So I'm going to be sitting with Tim and Ken Wilson before the end of the summer to kind of settle on the platform. And then the committee came up with a timeline for once we've settled on the platform won't be able to do everything we want it to do. And then to settle on a timeline for piloting that, for working with Tim's group and Ken to populating that profile and going forward. So it goes for everything from test scores to hopefully in the future something where the students can put something in, or a teacher can enter information for that student that will follow the student in the profile. I don't have the list in front of me right now, but it's about 15 to 20 items. Okay.
I hate to back up, but going back to science, and I know we're doing some renovations to Central this year with the science labs. Are we doing that? And we've done quite a bit extensively at Naperville North. So is the goal on that renovation just broad-based? Is to bring them up to the same level, or is it to kind of bring one more up so you can have ship the kids back and forth between the areas for curriculum, or what's the end objective?
Right now, it is to get them to all be very similar how they're structured right now. Because we have so many students in chemistry this year, we will have to rotate students in and out of the lab just because of pure numbers. So we will have students in and out of labs this year and probably next year.
So is there a need for more labs on the buildings, or
Right.
is you have enough facility? And I've got several reasons why I'm asking that question, but we have what we need to allow our students to go on a chemistry program, because I know it's blossomed in many districts, but we have what we need, and we don't need anything more.
Right now, we have what we need.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, during our planning meeting I'm sorry, yes.
I just had a quick question, Jane. Is the reason DES went away this past year, or it's next year?
This year,
So it's gone?
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, answer the question. I'm sorry.
So DES, this past year was our last year of DES.
Okay.
This year, we will not offer it anymore.
Okay.
And so it'll be chemistry, and that's where we'll have kind of a double.
See, that's my point. They
Right.
don't get stuck, so then, okay,
Right,
perfect.
and so
you're well
that's
aware of
why
it.
we will rotate out of
Yeah.
the lab this year.
They don't get stuck somewhere. It's a great problem to have, in my opinion. I highly support that. Great, thank you.
Okay. The board identified in 2013 digital learning as one of its priorities, and we have a commitment on online and blended learning, 116F. Jen is going to speak to that.
All right, I'll start with online learning. We have our Online Learning Consortium, which is Expanding Learning Opportunities, or ELO. We have offered courses in the school year of 14-15. We had 9 courses offered in that school year. During the summer, we have offered 4 courses. And for the school year of 15-16, we are offering 5 courses. There were 14 on the books. Students registered through the normal enrollment process. And the way enrollments fell, we are offering 5 of those 14. Our students have completed courses in 15 and in for this summer. We had around 67 students last year who took online courses. For summer, we have approximately 300. There are over 1,000 students who took courses through ELO in the consortium, but for our district, it was 300. Something I'm very happy to report, both from last school year and from this summer. We have not only very high rates of success, I would say we have a lot of students performing very well, in the top end of the courses. Data has been collected from both students and parents immediately after courses are over. So both for school year 14-15 and then also for session 1 of summer school, the session 2 of summer school will be collected very soon. Some of our key learnings have been that students do enjoy the online environment. They have found that one of the key things is being structured. Sometimes they report that they would like more structure and sometimes they would like more choice. But basically that one of the things that makes them successful is learning how to schedule their time in the online environment. Just an interesting fact, we had students take courses this summer from multiple countries, multiple states, while they're traveling, obviously, they still live here, and then also here in Naperville. Didn't want you to think that we had, increased boundaries, and then some other key learnings that we've had is we've created for the summer, and then it will sustain throughout the school year, is what we call common course shells, so that when a student goes into a course in Canvas, that they find a similar layout, a similar design. Students know where to go, parents know where to go. We have collaborated very much on the curriculum development across the 3 districts and would expect to have more of that in the future. Things to expect coming next for our online learning is getting our intergovernmental agreement signed for the 15-16 school year, but then also we are working on models that will help us sustain this work more long term and bringing some ideas for what would make up a model for future IGAs. So then if I shift to blended learning and the professional learning that we're doing through that is obviously being highlighted right now at our high schools through the professional learning that's happening as we bring devices into the high schools. There have been summer intensives for professional learning, and then we have also provided professional learning for key groups. So some of those that you see listed there are technology integration specialists, any of the teachers in the pilots, and then our learning support coaches. But you'll find other teachers in key groups that are on the fringe and learning. You'll find a lot of people in self-directed learning right now as well, as we're engaging in this environment. So things that we need to keep doing is continuing our strategy for online learning, looking at what is the best choice for District 203 in that strategy, really looking into beliefs and values for online learning, and seeing where we stand as a district. And then our next steps for blended learning is to really understand that blended learning is an instructional delivery design that actually supports students with individualized learning, personalized learning. And then something you've heard a lot about is, what teachers do is differentiate, and that's for the purpose so that we can meet our students' needs. So in the future, if you look down the road, you should start to see with blended learning that it actually moves into the regular work that we do instead of it becoming a separate, if you will, initiative or project.
Okay. Next, we're going to move to 216D. During our 2013 planning meeting, the board discussed the importance of professional learning in the area of differentiation, especially in the area of working with students of various cultures and backgrounds. And Jen has been leading that work, and she's going to share a little bit about what we've been doing.
Okay. So when a lot of districts start their work with culturally responsive practices or anything that deals with equity-based strategies, oftentimes they will identify a framework and a professional learning strategy. And as we started our work, we really didn't feel that there was a specific framework that would fit all of our needs. So one of the places that I think is important for the board to understand that we are right now is that we feel our Charlotte Danielson framework with the practices for teachers, if you use that lens, it really does serve as a framework where we can have conversations about being more culturally responsive for our students. We also feel that it defines a strategy for us with some of the components and indicators. Additionally, we feel that there are standards for administrators that really require administrators to seek best practice and to be more culturally responsive and to work through the lens of equity. And then with that, we support everyone by providing professional learning and, if you will, almost a research repository. One of the things I think that was a big point of growth for us last year that we'll continue with is that we identified implementation outcomes for both teachers and leaders that we feel will sustain us for quite some time. So for teachers, it's that they examine their own beliefs, values, and biases, and that they implement practices that respond to students' cultures and their needs. And then for our administrators, those expectations are also that they examine their own beliefs, values, and biases, that they also respond in their environment, but that they also implement and monitor the practices in their building. So this year's a big, the 15-16 school year is a big turning point for us where through the connection with Rising Star and the Danielson framework and then also their own standards, that they take the ownership for leading the work with culturally responsive practices and equity-based practices in their building. So through their normal school improvement processes, they'll be providing the professional learning and integrating the culturally responsive and the equity into their own goals. Next steps for us include to continue those expectations, that we embed that accountability for implementation at the building level, and then obviously sharing it and supporting them at the district level, and that we continue to keep current practice by giving our building leaders good information and access to research. And but then we also explore and share the building training models and the success that they're having with those models.
Kristen?
I'm just a little confused by that. Continue the expectation to meet outcomes for teachers and leaders. Is that, which outcomes are you?
So the outcomes for teachers and leaders, the outcomes are the ones that I mentioned, where the teachers have to examine their beliefs, values, and biases, and then where they also have to implement the culturally responsive practices.
Okay.
So that we
the outcome
continue
is
through with those
implementation
same
of it.
ones.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay, we're going to move to two that are related, 218C and 218D. Tim will speak to both of these. The idea of assessment and reporting of student progress was identified by both the Board of Education and community members through Future Focus, also with the implementation of PARC now, some legal requirements by the state that this occur. Tim?
Yeah, in this past year, we implemented PARC. As you know, the PARC was given in two different sessions. It was given in a performance-based session, and then later in the year at an end-of-year session for our students. We had that implemented in all of our schools electronically, which will be impacted this coming year by the DLI work as well. And so as we as we see the students receive those devices, that will actually have a positive impact for the scheduling of that for our students. Also, as part of this was the implementation of implementation of the work of a gifted committee in terms of the identification and placement processes. As presented in December, we talked about how we were going to be implementing new identification processes, which was in essence looking at the assessments of our students, and through that identify who would be possibly qualify for placement into the programs. In doing that, we also implemented an appeals process as part of that this past spring. So instead of always just having the regular matrix that qualified our students, students and their families and also staff members could apply for a kind of an out-of-the-box approach to qualifying for programming through the appeals process. This last year, we also, through that process, identified for PI Plus the Torrance test. We piloted that this past year as a possible identification test for our PI Plus program. We also wrote new assessments, placement assessments for our students, and gave those widespread in the district as part of a norming process. Then that will be a next step is as we gathered that data on those placement assessments, we're actually norming those to be used in the new placement processes this next year. And then also a new, as identified, research-based teacher tool called the Renzulli Scales that helps teachers to identify the behaviors and skills of students that should be qualifying for it, which we not only piloted this last year, but gathered data on for this coming year. We also, this year, as part of the balanced assessment system, worked on implementing the new literacy benchmark assessments, and then have been working with other areas such as art and also social studies to design new benchmark assessments for other other curricular areas for implementation. Next steps include developing those benchmark assessments this next year and piloting them, norming those placement tests to be used in the placement process. Also, we'll be working on not only growth measures for our students in terms of implementing those, but also learning about those as staff members as part of the growth in the evaluation process as well. Just to jump ahead a little bit on the changes in Park, this last year the state decided to bring the two different assessment sessions together. So Park will be given in just one session where it will no longer be PBA and EOY, but instead will be together in one session. The timeline and the windows for that have not been published yet due to the fact that the budget has not been approved yet by the legislature, and the assessment division will not go forward until they have funding for those. So still at question primarily is what levels at the high school will be tested. The anticipation is the decision will be between 2 or 3 grade levels for that assessment. Also, in order to fully comply with the federal government requirements for assessment, they will be implementing science assessments at each benchmark area. So there'll be one at elementary, there'll be one at junior high, and one at high school. What that will look like, all we can say is that we anticipate it'll be aligned to the next generation science standards. But anything else about that, we still are. It still will be revealed to us at a later date. Also, as part of this is, as part of the state budget, is the ACT. The contract with ACT has expired as of June 30th. And so under consideration, again, in the budget process is a possible RFP for whether ACT and SAT will be both considered as a college and career readiness test for our students, and whether that will be funded or not as part of the process.
don't you go ahead to 218D, Tim?
218D is.
Oh, I'm sorry. Jackie, go ahead.
Question, and you probably saw, Tim, the article in the Tribune
Sure.
yesterday about the state suggesting they weren't going to fund ACT training, so I guess that's something maybe that's what you were
Yeah,
referring
and,
to.
and it's still, we'll wait for the final word as to what comes through in the budgetary process, but, they have to decide whether they're going to go to a full RFP for that, which we anticipate if they approve a college and career readiness test.
So, but I guess the real question is for all these kids that we've had for, 13 years, we have to give them something, a tool to be able to bring to a school for admission, something that would work. So I'm not sure, I understand what RFP is, request for proposal, right?
Correct, sorry.
So, maybe I'm not understanding.
So, pardon?
For what? What is the RFP for? Sorry, the state submits the RFP?
Yeah, so.
To what, SAT or ACT?
Yeah, Michigan went through a very similar process where instead of just renewing the ACT, they went, the SAT has just been rewritten and it's rolling out this coming spring. It's more aligned to be a college and career readiness test. And so what Michigan did was they put out an RFP. So both SAT, College Board and ACT submitted proposals for what that could look like in the state of Michigan. Those proposals were considered and Michigan decided on the SAT as the test that they were going to use instead of the ACT. So we have a history in our state of using the ACT, but there's, again, some discussion about whether that would change to the SAT or not.
And as I read this article, this change would happen for our rising seniors.
It would happen probably for our juniors.
Oh, right. It would be, I'm sorry, right, some seniors might take it in the fall, but they would still be on the old system.
Yeah,
Right.
so all of our students can still take the ACT and the SAT on their own, and we are signed up to give those at our schools. So our schools are offering national date ACT and SATs on Saturdays. What's that question?
Yeah, I don't mean to belabor it. I understand. I just wanted to make sure you were aware of the funding issue, and it sounds like you are.
Yes.
The RFP, perfect. Thank you. Susan, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry. Wouldn't that change? I mean, we haven't aligned our curriculum. We're not teaching to the test, but we have, our curriculum is parallel to some extent with ACT. If the state were to go to the SAT, wouldn't that
The
cause
argument.
a huge change?
The argument by SAT is that SAT is aligned this last year with the Common Core, and that the actual leader of SAT, now College Board, is a former leader in the Common Core movement.
Oh, okay.
So their claim would be that the SAT is now more aligned with the Common Core and therefore is a viable choice according to the curriculum that people have in Illinois, since that is our state standards.
But there'd be other changes for us as well, because we started with PACT in 8th grade.
Great, exactly.
And we're using that
This
to
continuum, right?
Absolutely.
provide support for students who seem to be struggling in certain areas, and we're really using that. Is there a similar tool in the SAT
There
box?
is, but our students who would be taking the test as juniors this coming year would not have taken those preparation tools. So that would cause a realignment in this area as to some of those preparation tools if that were to come to fruition.
Great, okay.
Susan?
So your the Ranzulli scales, does that replace the Kingor ones that you used to use?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And does that change the kids that are currently in there that might have qualified under one that wouldn't necessarily qualify, or some that might have been missed?
What we've done is, it won't change. Those we won't re-qualify them. But what we did is, as part of our study, those who are in, we actually did some sampling of those students to see how the teachers would rate them on the Ranzulli scales as part of our study.
We've got a couple of questions, Tim. You mentioned another science assessment, or a new science assessment.
Correct.
So is that in addition to all the other tests that we'll have
Correct.
to give during? So what's the timing for that test to happen?
It has, to our understanding, it's not been developed. The state has actually made a proposal to the federal government to see if they have a plan. We've asked them for that plan, and they've said they're not going to provide that plan to us until the federal government responds to the plan to see if it's a viable choice. So we don't know the length of the test. We can take some guesses at it, but we don't know.
Okay, and park in general, I know there was a lot of states on board with it at first, and some of them dropped off. Has that number stabilized, or has anybody else decided to rejoin, or what's kind of the national?
It's stabilized, but it's still at a low number of states.
Yeah. 12, still at 12.
I think it's 9 stable ones, but 12 with some participation.
Mike?
Back to the SAT thing, I just want to make sure I'm straight on this. If, because one of the questions is not only who they choose, but whether they fund the test, correct?
Correct.
If they don't fund it, or can they, I guess they can do it, but or do you anticipate they would still force everybody to take it?
No.
So then it would become voluntary, and basically then every kid's on their own, ACT, SAT, depending on where they want to go to school and stuff like that, correct?
Correct.
Okay. The second part is, and I understand that thing's, because the contract expired, is different, but as far as the park testing window, and you said the assessment budget and all that, is that different than the education budget that that Rauner signed? Or, because the education budget was signed, is it like, is it an internal BOE?
I think the testing portion of it, to my understanding, has not been approved yet.
So that's in a different budget, or?
My understanding is it's not in the part of the budget that's been approved yet.
That was my reading in the article.
That's correct. Right. That's correct.
So there must be more education pieces than
Yeah,
the education.
no kidding. Okay, that answers my question. Thank you.
Okay. 218D is student achievement reporting, and in this, I have a partnership with Jane Willard on providing from the boards and also the community's request for reporting. We're looking at our reporting practices, which has also led to us discussing our beliefs and values in the area of reporting and grading. And so this is done pretty much in 3 stages. Our elementary, we had an elementary committee that met a year ago that completed their beliefs and values for in terms of elementary grading. They will be completing a pilot this coming year. In fact, just today we attended training with that group along with some representatives from other levels with national experts on standards-based reporting on how we can report out on standards rather than give generalized grades. And the purpose of this is to better communicate progress and achievement of students in this arena. The stages will look like elementary pilot this coming year. They'll be implementing the following year. Next year, the junior high will pilot, and then the following year they will implement. And then there will be a high school pilot in the 2017-18 school year, and then implementation the following year after that. So as you can see from the also, we've formulated a secondary committee that includes both our high school and junior high to be going through the process of, as well as our elementary staff had done. Next steps will be to implement that pilot at Beebe and Kingsley this next year. And then we're going to be looking at soliciting feedback from all the stakeholders involved, including our staff, students, and parents as part of that process and how the reporting goes for that. For our understanding of how our students are progressing through the curriculum. And then also we'll go through the intense process that our elementary group just completed of working on the reporting standards for our secondary coursework. So,
Questions on the reporting?
I do have one. Is that going to change the elementary report card then? That's what that means?
Yes, you'll see it. Report card will be, in some regards, it will look similar. In many regards, it will look different. We've created a portal that will help, for instance, take those reporting standards and then show parents the progress in those individual standards. In many ways, our previous supplement that we worked with had some of those elements of standards-based reporting in terms of how it was broken out. This will formalize it further.
Okay, thank you.
Done.
So is that something that's going to be incorporated with Infinite Campus then as well?
Yeah, the portal that Jane and Ken Wilson and I and a team of the elementary staff worked on was to get an Infinite Campus. We had looked at all of our options, and so this past fall and winter we looked at whether it would be better to create a different portal for staff and parents to use. What we determined is that we can, with the upgrades that Infinite Campus is making, we can build it right into Infinite Campus, which simplifies that process for parents especially, so they have that one place to go.
So will that then allow the student to have access to that as well? Because right now we don't have, like, even our junior high students don't have access to their grades on Infinite Campus, just the parents do.
Yeah, I think it's just parents at this stage.
At this point, it's just parents, but within the feedback process, those are some things that we will ask for feedback on, and then we have to see at what level of, what do we want our students to see? And at what level is it appropriate? What's appropriate at K-5 versus junior high versus high school?
One of the items the board identified in 2013 as an ongoing priority that really doesn't have an end date. That's why it's placed at 220. So this is an ongoing commitment, really not something that we'll see an end to, is a commitment to a diversity action plan and work with the diversity committee. So this commitment really kind of identifies some of what's been going on with that. We've really sought to develop strong partnerships with community leaders and community groups throughout Naperville as well as the surrounding areas. And as I'd mentioned, our Diversity Action Committee meets about 6 to 8 times a year, and that committee has continued to grow and expand. One of the signature events that will come out of the work of the Diversity Action Committee is on August 29th. We have our Welcome to 203 picnic. One of the things that the committee identified as a priority for the work of the Diversity Committee would be to create an environment that is welcoming and open to all families that move into our community. And with that, we use the Diversity Action Committee for continual feedback on initiatives that we have in our schools that we seek to try to close achievement gaps in our schools. So it's been it's grown into a very strong group, robust group, very comfortable to share opinions. And so, again, we'll continue to have diversity action plans, and later in the fall, after we've had our first meeting with the Diversity Committee, we're scheduled for our first of 3 regular reports back to the Board of Education on the work of the Diversity Action Committee. We're going to move to 316E, which is a master facility plan, and we'll let Brad speak to that.
Yes, the district is in the process of working collaboratively with Wright and Company to develop the master facility plan. Yeah? Okay, sorry. We have finished the comprehensive assessment, and we now have the first draft of the master facility plan underway, and we're in the process of reviewing it and preparing to complete it. We should have it finished coming next spring.
Is this the same report that we looked at and they were going to take out?
Yeah,
some of
so
the safety things
one of the
around?
things when we get to the planning schedules we want to talk about is when we update the work that they've reported back to us. Yeah, we will have to put that on the schedule, but they have a completed report that identifies the assessment.
Maybe I'm confused. So if it's July, we're going to wait till the spring for that?
We think we're talking about something different. We will
Oh.
do it. We will do it. I'm looking at September.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Next is student device strategy.
Before you leave that, the prototype furniture project, was there any?
Yeah, we've had,
feedback on that?
I'll let others speak too. We've had some ups with some pros and some cons with some of the furniture. It's really helped us identify what a standard's going to be for a regular replacement of furniture as necessary. We're not really looking at a strategy right now that pulls things out unless it's timed during the normal life cycle for replacement. We've identified some pieces of furniture and equipment in some of our buildings that just didn't work. And so we're looking right now at some, especially in an elementary library, of repurposing and putting in other places. But for classroom furniture especially, and we've identified prototype furniture so that as buildings are needed to replace desks, student chairs, and other equipment within their classrooms, we'll have a prototype that we can go to.
That might be something we want to close the loop on, because it was something where we talked about that on the board level, and so the community kind of heard about that, and I have gotten questions about what's going to happen with
Yeah,
that.
I think that would be something we could identify as a priority presentation.
Yeah, I agree with Kristen. I think people thought that it was a trial, and they were hoping, at least my couple adopted schools, were really hoping, boy, this would jump up. And I said, that was not it. It definitely, there was not funding or budget or I did not ever suggest that the board said it was anything more than 1 year and kind of looking at it, because a lot of it was donated, as I understood too, or at least comped in some way, shape, or form, so.
Not necessarily just
Not donate,
we worked
yeah.
with vendors on
Vendors,
some kind of
exactly. I
pricing,
think I
right?
used,
Mhm.
yeah, that's right. Awesome.
Okay, again, digital learning was identified by the Board of Education as a priority, and as you're aware, a part of that digital learning initiative is to put devices in the hands of our students. In phase 1 of our digital learning initiative and one-to-one strategy will begin this year at the high school, so I'll let Roger speak to the device strategy.
Okay, this is student device strategy, but it really refers to digital learning initiative, which aligns closely with what Dr. Hester went through on online and blended learning as well. The board and administration have been supportive of this for several years now, going all the way back to when we selected our learning management system, our BYOD pilot, our wireless network upgrade, our building and cabling upgrades, our internet connectivity upgrades, and those things that laid the foundation for this. So this has been something that is culminating now, but it's really been in the works for quite some time. As you're familiar with, in the spring we came to the board with recommendations based upon a pilot that we performed across 3 ecosystems. And the pilot recommendations are summarized here in about the middle of the slide. And with the first year being going with one-to-one with Google Chromebooks for all 9 to 12 students. Second year, Google Chromebooks for 6 to 8. And the third year, either Google or Apple environment for 3 to 5 at a 1-to-1 ratio, and then 2-to-1 ratio for Apple iPads in K2 in the third year of the program. Since the spring when you approved the implementation, I think the plane took off, and it gathered a lot of speed really quick, and there's been a lot of great work done by building administration, learning services team, IT team, to really take a lot of these activities in a short period of time and get them completed. I want to highlight the great job that was done in creating the professional learning for the teachers and the summer intensives that were had, and that structure has been very well received. Also, the IT team has processed and configured, as of this week, more than 8,000 Chromebooks out of the Fifth Avenue location, and we used Naperville students and interns to do that. And there's a great story. It's a great story on the district website that Michelle's team put out there, I think today or within the last day, that highlights and has pictures of the students and how the process worked and some quotes there. So that went really well. We've also trained a lot of our internal staff on the Google ecosystem. Many of them are now certified and ready to support it. All the hardware is here. It's now integrated into the registration process at each high school, so we're ready to roll. And we're also working on the communications with Michelle's team on the website to enhance, for the parents, students, and staff, very targeted and interactive communications around this whole initiative. So overall, we're coming in for a landing. I think it's going to be pretty smooth, and it's going to be great. Questions?
Mm-hmm. Donna?
So excited. Thank you for all your work on that.
You're welcome.
Had some questions actually from staff members who were wondering if they are, they already have their laptops, which they can do all of the Google app kind of things on.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think they understand that they're going to be issued a Chromebook as well. And there was concern about, just trying to cut costs and save. And can we do what we need to do on our laptop? Do we really need to have a Chromebook, and is it optional? Could it be optional, or?
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit to that. I think I'm going to let Jen, because it really comes from an instructional standpoint. There are some teachers who think it's important for them to be able to experience the exact same ecosystem, the exact same way that the students are experiencing it, and others who, because they can't access it the same way, intend to continue to use their laptop. So, Jen.
So we've had both things, and exactly what you said, Donna, where teachers have said, if I can do, after they've had the training and they realize and they say, if I can do everything that I can on my laptop, can we actually return those devices? And one of the things that Roger and I have talked about is that after teachers get comfortable with the students in the classroom, actually see if they don't need a Chromebook, that we could have basically some type of recall process where we recapture those devices, which then, of course, gives us more devices for junior high. One of the other things that we've had is teachers who may not need the Chromebook for instruction, but play some type of support role. And where, initially they feel that they may need the device. In some of those cases where they don't have the direct hours with students all of the time, in a classroom instructional setting, we've made a device available so that they can become comfortable with it. And then, again, after instruction gets underway in the school year, if they absolutely feel they need the Chromebook for some reason, then they could have that as well. But we do feel that for teachers, they can do more than just what's required through the Google ecosystem from their laptops.
Okay, 320A also represents one of the commitments that really doesn't have an end to it. It was identified by the Board of Education and Community as something that we needed to kind of be an ongoing process. There's a couple bullet points there, but what I will say is that there are some specific items under 320A that are going to have to become priorities or continue to be priorities, and that's we've had a lot of conversation recently about our investment strategy, and then also we've had conversation about concern about state resources and state dollars, some conversation at the last board meeting about federal dollars as well. So this is going to continue to be an area where we're going to have to kind of monitor and stay on top of. One of the highlights of the year is that we did take a very close look at our budget for 15-16, and we're able to really reduce and limit the increase planned for this year compared to years past. Brad, is there anything you want to add to that? Jackie?
No.
I asked if he had anything to add, and he shook his head. So.
No, I think what would be helpful, I don't know what you're going to do with this document, if it's going to go to the public, but if people are watching, and I'm sure lots of people are watching this evening, but I think it's really important that you and your staff have worked on more robust reporting, and I think that goes a long way in terms of transparency, and I think that would be a great thing to add. If the work's being done, let the world know it.
Actually, it's, obviously we've had several discussions on this already, and I know Brad is working on trying to make a clear, concise, easily read cash flow table or chart or projections. One thing that, I still haven't heard the board weigh in on clearly, I've had some offline conversations, but what the definition of cash is. The 4:40 talks about cash reserve at the end of the year without the June taxes, the June collection. The key word for me is cash. Everybody I've talked to does not consider long-term investments cash. And I understand accounting things are accounting things, and that's fine. But as far as the intent of the board policy, I think we need, it's quote-unquote liquid cash or something that's cash equivalent, easily liquidated without any market risk. That's my feeling. I think it would be helpful so Brad doesn't go in the wrong direction if the individual board members would weigh in on that so that when we start talking about the policy and have further discussions next week at our regular business meeting, that we don't have to start from scratch and we have some data we can actually use. So, go ahead.
I'll weigh in. I think cash is defined by that policy, should be cash and cash equivalents. And I think the reason there wasn't a large discussion in years before this, a big part of the portfolio was commercial paper. And I think the world sees commercial paper as being very liquid. And that's why it wasn't further discussed. So I would say it's cash and cash equivalents. I don't think intermediate bonds or long-term bonds fit into that classification. And the reason I point that out to other people, recall that different times when we've looked at different bonds and asked for pricing and all, and when there aren't bidders, that would tell you right there, that isn't liquid. And some of those weren't long-term, they were intermediate term. So anything in that immediate range, it would have to be a very short-term bond in my mind. You know, we can get around to talking, is that 2 years? Is that a certain type of bond? But it would have to have a ready market and is liquid, you know, you'd have to be able to get rid of it within 24 hours. And that's, in the industry, it's just called a cash equivalent, so.
The intention when we wrote the policy was that it was cash. If there wasn't enough money from the state that covered us, we wanted to have that in our coffer, and I don't see that change. I don't feel any different today than I did when we wrote that, so.
That's my understanding as well, is looking at it in terms of what is the impact of having those reserves on whether or not we'd have to do additional borrowing. And to the extent that we're in a situation with our bonds where we would almost have to consider borrowing because the loss would be so great to cash them in at that time if we needed them, that doesn't seem like cash to me. So it seems like it needs to be in a liquid state where we wouldn't be at risk of loss of our capital for if we had to utilize those cash reserves.
I agree, cash equivalent.
Bow to the superior knowledge of my fellow board members.
I agree it needs to be cash, and it's just if the old practice, or at least what a lot of districts use, is CDs. And CDs, if you had to sell them on the short cycle, the hit to the principal on that is a lot less than what the hit would be if we sold bonds. So it might be more comfortable if we had CDs in that realm, if that was going to be treated as a cash equivalent, only because there'd be less financial loss. But I think when you're talking about bonds, as far as the financial loss goes, there's a market-driven interest factor that we won't know up until the day we're ready to sell, how much money we're going to lose. So if we had bonds in the cash equivalent, we wouldn't really know how much to keep on hand to cover that delta plus or minus of what we lose on the sale. So to me, it would be most important to have 100% liquid cash in that fund, so we know what we have available to spend.
Okay, I think that
And
provides.
I also want to say too, it's okay to look at accounting practices and so forth, and what accounting principles might recommend. But it's always up to the Board of Education to figure out what they're really most comfortable with in the finances, because at the end of the day, we're the ones who answer to the community in that regard. So there's nothing wrong in bringing up the issue, but I also think some of these, if they're going to be accounting principles, they have to be probed a little bit with the board before we decide what we're going to call them.
Okay, Susan?
I also think that the 10% mark is excluding other funds that we've agreed have to have cash balances in them. Yes, that would be in addition to that 10%.
So just
Agreed.
I agree. Just want to clarify that, and just to state what we talked a little bit about in closed session. We don't want to commingle those funds, the health insurance and the cash balance. We want them kept separate. In other words, we don't want to flip cash into the health balance fund, put more bonds in the health balance fund, or take cash out of the health balance fund, flip in bonds to kind of protract that interest or longevity period, because the health balance fund doesn't get drawn down as fast as the cash balance does, because the health balance is a reserve for the health fund, may not get drawn the entire year, but we don't want to put more risk in there than we have to.
So I think, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll just make it a little simpler than that. I think those, the definitions of the reserves in those should be kept separate.
Sure. Yeah, I think this is helpful guidance and helpful discussion for us as we build the cash flow projections for discussion, as Mike said at our next Board of Education meeting. So.
If our policies are not clear enough on that, then we should update them so that it.
Yeah, we'll also be looking at all of Section 4 beginning on August 3rd, and we'll have some, based on the conversation the board had at the last meeting, last Monday. We've done some update to 430. We had looked at 430 back in August of 2014. We had talked about some potential revisions to it, and then based off of board conversation at our last meeting, we've pulled a lot of that out to go back to the original policy with some clarifiers in there. So we'll present that as a draft on the 3rd for board feedback and action if appropriate at the second meeting in August. Okay, and then 418, board identified as a priority when we met in 2013 was school business partnerships. Kane serves as the cabinet lead for this particular commitment.
Okay, so a lot of work has gone into reconstituting what was the School Business Partnership Council as it previously existed into the Business Council on College and Career Readiness, a title that the group has chosen for itself. B3CRs is what we call it when we have to have a meeting. And it is made up of more than a dozen business partners from across the community and across different industry sectors, although we are always looking to fill a couple of sectors. And one of the co-chairs is a member from this community. Last year it was Deb Beard. And I have to look and see who we're looking to see who it'll be this year. Deb's not going to be on the council this year. So what we did is really, I'll be honest, to go through the bullet points, we spent a lot of time on the why this year, talking about early on, what is it we're driving at that maybe is different than what had been done before. And the focus was on college and career readiness and how partnerships with businesses in the community can help develop that in students, no matter what the level, even if it's at literacy or if it's bringing an expert in from outside to speak to kids, or the gold standard, which is an internship. So one of the things we did this year is took that exemplary partnership breakfast and we went out with the existing council members and found people who are not partners, who are in the community, who we could bring to this breakfast and show what was possible. And it actually worked very well. We made a lot of new contacts. I've outlined a number of internships, particularly that came of that. The R.R. Donnelly one was already in the works. You've heard something about that, but we had 6 students at R.R. Donnelly. You can read about that on the website. But as a result of the breakfast and the council, we had, I think, 3 to 5 at City of Naperville, 3 to 5 at Naperville Township. Loaves and Fishes did one again. They're not new. And then Hendrickson Engineering, and we also had interns in IT, and we had interns in our Communications and Community Relations Department this year who have already added value. We have more than 25 currently entered in the database. One of the things we did is when we talked about the why, a lot of people had wildly varying ideas of what was a partner, what it meant to be a successful partner, how did I know I was a partner, how did I tell you if I wanted to stay a partner, and was it in perpetuity? Once we did something together, was I always a partner? And we went through a process and tried to create a very simplified process whereby at the end of the year, the principal or the building rep, in this case, because it could be an IC at the high school level, or even a teacher, met with the partner and went through a simple one-page set of questions that reflected the criteria that the council came up with. And then at the end, the partner says, yeah, I want to do this again, or you know what, I'm not ready to do this again, or I want to do it, but maybe let's try it a little differently. We have 25 of those already entered in. We want to go back and finish up many, many more that need to be completed. And then you can see as next steps, what we want to do is launch the year by celebrating who are our partners this last year and use that as a way to go out and recruit more partners for the following year. And one of the other things we'll work on that will be new, we had a best practices committee. Really, they ended up merging and becoming part of the group that decided what's successful, criteria for a partnership. And we want to work with them to create a topic, a roundtable based around a topic that's common. We're thinking around technology and learning in organizations because it's big for us right now. When we went to the Donnelly presentation, the group that was leading it was the Learning and Development Group, where all they do is online education basically in-house. And we want to find out what are other business partners in the community doing with technology and learning and create a roundtable for best practice. So that's one of the things we're going to shoot for in the fall. That's kind of where we are right now.
So I'm glad that we're celebrating 25 partnerships. We used to celebrate 250 partnerships. And I feel like 8 years ago, it was really robust. And maybe we didn't know what it was. But I feel like it played a big role all the time in everything from our mini courses that they did at the elementary schools to the high schools, to the groups, to the chamber, and kind of how it was all kind of knit together. And I feel like we've been talking about it for a really long time. Like, when does that next jump, or when does that next thing, and it's nothing personal against you, truly. I just feel like It's been handed from kind of one person to another, one group to another.
You know, I think, and I'll let you talk a little bit about the work. I think the big thing, the big conversation that Kane hit on a little bit is the conversation of the why, or what is the partnership, and how do you define a partnership? And partnerships can be looked at in various ways. So I think the big thing is that coming together with a roundtable of business leaders in our community to say, what is a partnership? And if we're going to formally call you a partner, what does that partner mean? Because partnership looks in different ways.
It does.
You could look at those who sponsor or support NEF events as partners of the district, the individuals who come and speak at career days as partners. So I think it's really looking at this as a more formal partnership. Okay?
Yeah, and we're not trying to be exclusive, but we are trying to create something so that, if I was a partner 3 years ago and I did one thing, that doesn't mean that I'm in perpetuity always going to be touted as a partner. I want to build a relationship. And so we're looking to create something that's sustainable, and that would be the main word we're kind of focusing on. Once we know what it is, how do we make it sustainable?
So who builds those? Because I know like the teachers from the business classes, when I worked at the chamber, they used to call me and say, gosh, I need 4 businesses that I can walk to, and I need to do this, this, or that. I'm like, here's 7, call them. And that's what they did.
And we do still have much of that going on, and I'll be honest, some of it is simply getting the documentation to them so they can tell us what's going on. A perfect example is internships. During the course of the years, we talked more about them. We found out there were internships going on where we had students going to business places and doing, work in an internship-based relationship that, frankly, the ICs just didn't tell anybody about. They just went and did it. And some of that's still going on. But somewhere along the way, I can't speak to where, the process for documenting that and moving it up so that it could be communicated and shared out just, was not sustained. And that's one of the things we're trying to create and make sustainable so that, yes, the ICs know when you have this, go, reflect on it, send us something, and we'll put it in a communications plan so that we can publicize it.
Okay.
And I guess my perspective, I've sat on this committee for 2 years, and it's not that they haven't done a lot of really good work. But I get to the point of saying, at least having watched my kids personally go through this district, get out, go to colleges and get jobs, I say, what do we need to do to help our kids that are juniors and seniors? They need to do internships. So I would like to, as one board member, forget about all the documentation. Make it more freeform. I saw Marcy from the city of Naperville say, I'll take 5 as she's walking out the door. It was that easy. A couple of us said, Marcy, you're here instead of Chirico because he's running for mayor. Can you take some interns? Yeah, by the end of the meeting, she said 5. That's how it happened. So I would love for the board to be thinking, we have to give direction. So we said we wanted this to be authentic. We wanted it to get to the classroom. But I feel if our kids, getting back to making our students look different on applications, everyone's got great test scores. Everyone's taken advanced classes. Everyone's has this robust experience of after-school activities. They've got to have that workplace experience.
So I think that would, I'm sorry.
And I would love to break down the barriers of all the documentation and all getting back to the 200 to get our kids in there.
Can I just, a couple of things. The documentation's on the back end.
Yeah.
Okay, but one thing we found, even with the city of Naperville, was they said, yes, we want to do it, and then there was a long pause of what does that mean? Like, they didn't know what they were, they just said they'd do it. We had to sit down in a few meetings and go over, what is it you're looking for? So there is work that goes behind it.
I'm not trying to say that. Yeah. I sat through 2 meetings of planning, 2 years.
Yeah.
And even before, Kane, you were even here, we had 2 or 3 other years
so I
where
think,
we had this on
Jackie,
hold.
you hit on something that I think is very important that'll have to be a future conversation to ask you to get back to from the board, is guidance on what is a partnership. And this really grew out of concern 2 years ago regarding, in part our relationship with some corporations or some groups within our business community, and feeling that our relationship with the business community was not where it should be, and that one way to address that would be through more robust partnerships, better community engagement with our business community. And so that's really the approach that we've taken. And I believe that our relationship as a school district with our business community in town is as strong as it has been. But when we look at what is a business partnership, I think we could use a little bit more direction from the board or thoughts from the board about what is a partnership, and what's a measure that we will look at to determine if you're successful on addressing this priority?
So just let me answer a question to have my colleagues be thinking about. So I'm great. I love the fact that you sit, Dan, on the Naperville Development Council. You kind of know what's out there and don't get surprised, and that this background and detailed and foundation work's done. But I would rather look at it from the student's perspective and say, what do we need to give these students? We have banks on every corner on Washington. We have attorneys' offices. We have personal fitness places. We've got food things. What can we do to make our students look different as it relates to these? I don't see the Park District on here, probably the best partnership we have. I would like to say, we need your help to make our students look different. Every time, NEF, at the end of that, the golf outing, we're looking to make our students look different. If you think you have an opportunity, paid or unpaid is great. Our kids, not only can they write about it in an application, can they talk about it in an interview, they need the workplace experience. I'm off my soapbox.
Well, I agree with the student focus, and I would put it actually, to enrich our students, not just to make them look better, but to enrich
of course. I'm being blunt.
Of course,
Right.
but to enrich our students
Right.
for that educational opportunity, to give them that workplace experience. But I agree, when you expressed it just then, you were expressing it from the district and the business
Right.
side. I think it is more a tool of what can we offer our students.
But I think that's the direction we gave.
Yeah.
We gave that direction, and so now we've sort of seen what that looks like.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think there's two perspectives, because when this really emerged as a priority at the time, there were some relationships with the community that involved the school district that really were not healthy, that we really had to work toward rebuilding and making stronger. And so that's really where our priority and our focus has been. I understand, I hear now, you've put it in a good perspective in terms of at least where some members of the board are,
Right.
more of a focus on how does it enhance the educational experience,
I think that would be
classroom
a good
experience,
topic to talk
instructional
about.
part.
Yeah.
Excuse me. The internship process is actually pretty simple. I mean, I offered an internship this year on behalf of my company, and Kane sends out a couple of pieces of paper. You fill it out. It takes you about 10 minutes to fill it out, and you send it back in. So I'm wondering, do the businesses know that there's a difference between a business partnership and an internship, and how simple it really is to get an internship put forward? Because the candidate that was 3 candidates that took up on it, and there was a screening process and so forth to make sure that the candidate would fit. The one that was offered was really a standout student. It was just he had some other commitments that would prohibit him from working from the job. But are we explaining the internship process and
we are. I mean, one of the challenges this year was sitting with the subcommittee on internships, and you've seen it, and I know documentation, but really it's just a guide to ask questions.
Right.
And we tell people up front, if you know what you want already, let's go.
Right.
But if you don't,
Right.
let's go through some of the questions. One of the hard parts is getting it out there and to people who have never thought about doing it. But we've also had many partners who are doing other things who we approach about internships, and they say very plainly, I'm not ready to do that. A couple law offices I know in particular, and that's okay too. But we do push that as a great opportunity for the kids to learn. However, one thing we did get from the committee, both the internship subcommittee and the business council as a whole, was we need to make clear what's in it for them.
Right.
Right? Because they're not always thinking that if there's anything in it for them. They're thinking this is a lot of work. I'm not sure. And so we have to develop that message too when we think about, yes, what is it doing for our kids? We have to make sure we have a good message for the partner saying, how are you going to benefit from this in a way that you want to do it again? So we've gotten a lot of great feedback in that regard, and I think it's only going to get better.
And that's really my, as far as what they have to do to get the right intern, I mean, we're doing a pretty good job in screening down the applicants and making sure that they're focused on what the internship is going to mean to them and what they're going to get benefit out for them. So they should be pretty well matched to the company going forward, which should ease the employer's mind somewhat.
We do aim so that whatever happens, they want to do it again.
Yeah.
But we are working out the process for doing that, because some districts work on a class-based process, which is very onerous. You have to take a whole class to even get an internship. We're trying to serve as more of a clearinghouse and a facilitator, but it still requires our ICs at the high school, or Julie, or me, or whoever's ready to facilitate to do that matching up process. And that's just something we're trying to be very
And
nimble about.
Maybe we do it maybe another option would be, have an afternoon or an evening or a class for the kids, and have them to go out and work with the actual businesses and say, and it doesn't always have to be through the schools.
Right.
These
And-
internships can take many different forms.
And we have others. NCTV does them. We don't have any part in that, but our kids go there. And so
but
we're
if
not.
they can understand and get some tools behind them, I just think, if our kids, we need to have them look different. They've done all this great work, and we have the resources. This is not some small town in central Illinois. There are a lot of businesses and a lot of opportunities here, and we need to capitalize on it. And maybe we do that. It's a hybrid, like ELO, but it's for internships. Part of them are out of this building, and it's nuts and bolts and more structured, and then others are giving them the tools to go out to kind of find their own. So,
I appreciate the thoughtful approach because I know that we had a lot of people who were called partners and issues came up with that using the logo, stuff like that. I appreciate the thoughtful approach to that for a lot of reasons. One, I've used this example before, so I apologize for everybody who's heard that, but a car dealership in town, for example, wants our students who are in the automotive program to go in and learn oil changes, except the kids in our automotive program are learning how to build electric race cars. They're not learning how to change oil. So that kind of internship for our kids would be great for the business, but not for our kids. And I think that more thoughtful approach where we're saying they could probably get a job at the dealership to change oil. Why would they have to do an internship? So balancing the value of that internship, especially if we're going to be administering it, I think is good. I think we also have security concerns. I mean, we've developed a system where somebody coming into our building has to put their driver's license. I'm sure we have to be cautious about who we send our kids to work with in offices by themselves without supervision, right? Like we want to make sure that these are responsible places. And I know that this has been a struggle too. A lot of those positions, the work that is meaningful is not work that 17-year-olds can do legally. I mean, I'm sure law officers, that's why law offices have resisted it, because they can't risk that somebody would have access to data, or medical offices have to be careful about that. So I see where it's challenging. I appreciate them being thoughtful, and that we've really, and as long as it's not too cumbersome.
We're trying to strike the balance, both on the front end and on the back end with that reflection form. So if a student comes back at the end and says, I was only making copies, for 8 weeks, we have a chance to maybe talk to the employer about, hey, how could we work this better? But if we don't have that, it just it could go merrily on its way with no quality control, and our students won't want to do it because the word will get out. Or our partners will, we had one this summer who frankly came to the breakfast, thought they wanted to do it, and it kind of came out that they were going to not hire somebody if we gave them an intern, and then they wanted to know if they could then employ them for additional hours beyond. And we had to stop and pause and say, I don't think we're in it for the same thing.
Right.
And we had an honest conversation with a partner. And it was only because we had listened to the people on the committee and talked about what was really needing to go on. And so we're hoping that the deliberateness will pay off with more nimbleness going forward.
Right. And I think that the business partnership initially started off as a way to build relationships with the community so that, they were coming in for meetings and lunches and learning about what we were doing, and less about our kids working there. And it's become more meaningful over time, which I think is good. It's hard to have something meaningful with 250 people as partners, or whatever their varying understanding is, so we had to change that. So I appreciate that. I understand. I think it's a wonderful thing for our kids to have this kind of opportunity. I wonder how we're balancing that, what recognition students get versus our kids who are working jobs after school, where they are maybe working in an office or working someplace where they're getting experience and dealing with the public. I mean,
I don't know, but I can't speak to the recognition in that regard. I know R.R. Donnelly's, has basically a scholarship that comes at the end of that one. We do strike for paid internships whenever possible, but it's part of the conversation with the partner. If it's appropriate, if it's doable, duration and things like that. We talk about other ways to recognize with letters of recommendation to college, with reference calls, with things like that. And frankly, we find that the really successful ones, that partner usually wants a place for that kid in some way, shape, or form after a successful experience, or they want another kid to come back. And that's what we're hoping to build up again and again.
Any other questions? Okay, we've been going at this for not quite 2 hours, and we're going to go into the emerging areas of focus as an S aspect. But before we do that, would anybody like to take a small 5-minute break?
Bio break?
A short one. Take a 5-minute break.
Right.
Whereas, when you do the internship, we talk a little bit about, hey, there needs to be some mentorship, some learning.
Right.
How you doing, Donna?
Like, what are your goals?
Good.
Right.
We talk about, do you have goals that you want to achieve? Whereas if it's just a job, they're
Right.
not thinking about goals.
Right.
And so that's one of the things, it's hard to know because our kids.
But that's the difference between an internship and just getting the minimum wage job, that it's got to be more meaningful.
Meaningful, goal-oriented with a little feedback from, whoever the partner is, at the firm. If somebody is willing to say to a young person, hey, let's go out to lunch and talk about how it's going.
Well, that's what I had to tell that's what I had to tell the kid who came in. I had to tell him, you can't do it.
Right.
I'd call him up and talk to him about it. And after I got done talking to him, he goes, well, my parents told me the same thing. So your parents are giving you good advice.
But hopefully that kid will come back next summer knowing.
Right.
Well, no, he was treated fairly.
Right.
Number
I think
one.
that was for sure.
Oh, no.
Are you on call tomorrow, Mike? What's that? Are you on call tomorrow? No. Okay.
We have a meeting, right?
And that's what I wanted to make sure that was set.
doggy? Is that your puppy? We're pulling the trash out every day. The puppy? Did I tell you that they were opening the trash can and pulling the trash out every day? So then my husband put on the trash can oh my gosh. Isn't he beautiful? He is. Do you still have one? Yes, I have one. I know. He's getting older. Oh no, I have a yellow lab. That was an excellent choice. Marcus was showing a picture of that. He's actually on vacation. He came in.
Oh, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I'll ask him.
It's pretty nice.
Can I get some more water, Dan? No, I have to
I
have
think
some.
there's some over here. Some more. What? Plates? Did you get the emails?
A whole bunch.
What's next? What are we doing next? And then are we gonna go through and do like
All right, is it, I don't want to interrupt. Excuse me. Hey.
Gavel.
All right, if you're all ready, we can go back. It's been about 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, the next section we'll move into we've labeled as emerging areas of focus. These are commitments and priorities that either have started, preliminary work leading up to the work has started, or are scheduled a little bit off or a little bit farther down the road on our priorities. So we'll go ahead and go through this in the same way. We're only going to touch on the ones that are identified as BOE priorities, and we're going to begin with 118B, ELL program, with Jane Willard, who's the commitment owner. You've noticed in the audience, that's Dr. Marion Friebus-Lamon, who's our Director of Language Learning, in case there's any support that Jane or Jen may need on a couple of our commitments. I know.
Well, I will give credit where credit is due, and she is the leader of a lot of this work that I'm going to go over. This team has been very busy, this team of ELL teachers, to align the K-12 ESL curriculum to our literacy curriculum. So this year, as curriculum was implemented in literacy, they really looked at that curriculum and they created their standards against that curriculum, and then they're going to be implementing that as well. The teachers also have received professional learning on language objectives and have been teaching with those and posting those in their classrooms. Professional development was done at the junior high and also this summer with our K-5 folks in SIOP training. And SIOP training is Sheltered Instruction Observation Protocol. And what that training is it really is best practice in ELL instruction. It support students with strategies for their learning, and not only our ELL teachers engaged in that, but also our classroom teachers. And so it was really a nice partnership because right along with that, we have provided professional learning and co-teaching. We really want to get our ELL teachers back in those classrooms, co-teaching side by side with the core curriculum, core area teachers as they really implement the core curriculum for all ELL students. Learning Services this year will continue to work with building administrators to look at what best practices are, what our programming is. Marion will put together a team of teachers and administrators this year to really look at our programming and think through what do we want all of our students, our ELL students, to engage in, what that program will look like at our elementary, our junior high, and then at Naperville North as well. So those are those steps. I will take questions. I also will defer to Marion to answer questions as well.
Okay, let's move to 118C. 118C is our dual language program that is identified both by the board and Future Focus 203 as areas of priority. Jen?
This commitment really, the purpose of it is to review our dual language program and then also look for areas of opportunity where we need to revise. So one of the things that I need to do as well is give credit to Dr. Friebus-Flamen for all the work that she has done. I think this commitment is currently underway. One of the strategic moves that we have made is to get the right leadership in place. So Dr. Friebus-Flamen is leading much of this work. And additionally, the hiring of our dual language program coordinator, and that is Gabriela Velasquez. And one of the key things that was identified, I'll talk about a couple things through program improvement. Number one, we needed to change our program design, focusing most specifically on the curriculum, and we've made a major curricular shift. The other things that we've identified is that we need to really look at what we're assessing and what we are counting as indicators of success. And we are on the pathway of doing that one. So just a little bit about the curricular shift, because I think it's really important. We have moved to a model of what we call simultaneous biliteracy. And in that move, we have very clearly identified that we need to have the same expectations for our students in our dual language program as we do in our monolingual English programs. And with that, we have written with the standards for Spanish language arts and made sure that the Spanish language arts curriculum aligns to our English language arts curriculum. It's been very important that we also make sure that our language allocations match the model and that they also represent what would be compliant with the state. So we have made moves to make sure that we have brought the program into compliance in that way. We have also worked under Marion and Gabriella's leadership very hard with the junior high curriculum. As you know, we will be implemented in 6th, 7th, and 8th at those grade levels. And we have worked with both the content area and incorporating the language standards into the content, and then also making sure that the language arts the Spanish language arts curriculum, is mapped out as well. We have also worked with the elective course, which is the Spanish language and cultures, A and B, and then also have plans for and have, as you know, you have approved Spanish language and culture for Spanish speakers at the high school. So that really focuses not only curriculum, but also the pathway. And then additionally, I would say Marion then together with Tim have really been looking at our assessments, and then how those assessments allow us to look at students' performance in English, in Spanish, and then also, obviously, we're looking at performance in those content areas. And then some of the places that we have to go for growth, we continue within this program to work on our recruitment and our hiring. We've been working very carefully with HR on those strategies, and I think We've identified that we need to begin hiring as early as possible for any of the vacancies that we have and be as proactive as possible. And then we also, a lot of work has been done in resources and making sure that we're now aligning resources not only with the curriculum, but then making sure that we look at the alignment with the resources with the monolingual English curriculum as well. So I think that's a basic summary of where we are with dual language.
Kristen?
I'm so excited that you talked about the program design because I didn't see it on your list, and that was, I thought, where we left off. So I'm so happy to see that. Is that fully implemented, or are you sort of still in the process of determining which, changes you need?
I think we've determined the changes that we need, but we are still in the process of implementing.
Okay.
So many of the curricular structures in place, not all of the mapping is complete in every area.
Okay.
But we know where we're headed, and we have the processes and the practices to get there.
Okay. Are you starting to see any improvement from the program design changes? I know that was part of the discussion that we had because we were looking at the program design, in part looking at those, where we're struggling in terms of our results. Are we seeing any impact from that yet, or
I'll
still
speak
too early?
to, in terms of implementation, we're seeing improvement in clarity, teachers knowing what they're teaching and the structures for collaborating and supporting each other. In terms of student improvement, we're scheduled to report to the board on that in October.
I saw.
And if it's okay, I think if we could
Okay.
really, make that a comprehensive presentation, that would probably be a good idea.
Okay, last question. I know that the teachers engage the families a lot in this particular program, much more so than in other, well, of course, teachers are always engaging families, but that's really a part of the program, I would say, a unique part of the program. Is there a part that you have a plan for that, or that you're working towards either family engagement best practices so that individual schools who may not have as much of expertise there, or I know a lot of our kids start at Ann Reed, so that family engagement piece that kind of continues.
That is one of the indicators of success that we identified was a family engagement part. If Marion wants to comment on where we are with that.
One of the things that we have been working with, not just with Ann Reed, a little bit with Ann Reed, especially as kindergartners are coming in from Ann Reed.
Totally, yes.
But then also with parents all the way up through the junior high. I've met with them on a number of occasions, and we've had some discussions. One of the things that we've been talking about really is, to structure something along the lines of a bilingual parent advisory council, but really focusing on the dual language parents. So that's something that we have a handful of parents who have already volunteered to help in any way that they can. So we're going to move forward with discussions on how we can, really increase some of that input from parents and involvement with parents.
That's wonderful. I know the teachers have been doing a great job just on their own, but I think any supports that we can bring in, for example, having sat on the Diversity Advisory Council, I know that it was difficult to get that participation, and part of it may be that language. So it's exciting to see that you're sort of pulling it together from your own perspective.
And one other thing that we did do was we did a parent panel, and we did it twice actually. Once was for the incoming kindergarten parents, so the parents at Beebe and Riverwoods actually just kind of came together to talk about that whole elementary school dual language experience and answered questions. And then we did the same thing at Jefferson for the parents who were going to be coming into the program at Jefferson Junior High. And we were able to do that bilingually with Spanish-speaking parents and English-speaking parents. So it was a great success.
Susan?
Can you share, because these kids are in 8th grade this year and they're going to high school next year, so the program's been around, that means for 9 years now. What does that look like?
What does it look like when they go to high school?
To matriculate to there, yeah. What does their curriculum look like?
What we have planned for right now is the Spanish Language and Culture for Spanish Speakers course. You can take that course if you are in the dual language. So it's basically whoever has the level of learning for language. So you can take that course if you are in the dual language program, but we also have other students who may have the level of learning who
From
could
home.
also take that course.
But what about, so they'll only be having one course
when they hit high school?
Yes, right now our plans are for one course, and we've had many discussions, and if Marion wants to comment too, since she's been here, we've had many discussions about whether we would provide others, but we have not planned that yet.
One of the great things about I have to hit the button. One of the great things about the dual language program is that it is designed to enrich students, whether they whatever their language background is when they first start. And so giving them all the way up to like a 50-50 in the elementary schools provides that very strong foundation. And really by then students are bilingual. And so then in the junior high we have the language arts in Spanish and English to maintain and to grow. And then we offer the elective course, which offers students in the dual language program a foreign language option, very much like the other students would have. They can either take an exploratory or a foreign language. And so that elective then gives students that option of going deeper and exploring more with the Spanish language and culture, which is something that we would not be able to do with the Spanish courses that we offer at the junior high. So then as we roll up into high school, what we wanted to do was to offer those students, again, the opportunity to continue to grow and learn in their Spanish understanding. There isn't as great of a need to have as much time in Spanish, and we certainly wouldn't want to take away any other choices that students have. So if we were to teach content courses in Spanish, we wouldn't have the same variety or all of the options that students have. And so really by giving them that rich experience in their freshman year as a course that's designed really for students who have that level of proficiency. Mm-hmm. And then we do have AP courses then that could carry them through the next couple of years. Then that really gives them the whole high school experience and continues to build on their Spanish proficiency. Does that make sense?
Okay.
I was going to say just two things we failed to mention. There is a district leadership team that meets for this commitment. That is all the principals who have the dual language program in their schools. And then this commitment really kicks into full gear during this school year with the review, because one of the things that we really have to consider is, as all 5 of our elementary sites offer K-5, what do our sites look like as we move into junior high at that point?
I just had a question. What type of class is this? Is it a language arts kind of class? This one class that these students we've had from kindergarten on that have been in dual language up till 8th grade, what is the class? If you said it, I'm sorry, I missed it, but is there a name to the class? Mm-hmm. Is it?
Yes, it's called Spanish Language and Culture for Spanish Speakers.
Okay.
And what that course is based on is the 6 themes that have been identified by the American Council of Teachers of Foreign Languages for the AP courses. But we're not teaching the AP courses,
okay.
But what we're doing is we're taking those basic 6 themes and really designing a literature and culture course that's taught completely in Spanish.
So does that count as, what kind of requirement is that? Is that a history requirement? Is that a humanities credit in high school, or is that a?
It's a world language.
It's a world language.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, it's a world language. Okay, okay. Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay. In 2013, the board identified social emotional learning as a priority. I think the conversation was, don't forget about the social emotional part of it, and it emerged as a very common theme throughout all of the Future Focus 203 conversations. Christine Igo will update you on our commitment to social emotional learning.
We've been working with a small committee of teachers that represent both elementary, middle, and high school. And we've gone through and identified what the vision, mission, and our beliefs are so that we can begin to really build and say, so how do we take this information and how do we build these skills that we want for our students and integrate them into our academic areas. And as we head into the upcoming school year, we'll have 2 committees that are going to be kind of working, or we'll have 2 things that are occurring kind of simultaneously. One is we'll be working with our teachers and providing some professional learning around what are the social emotional standards and what does best practice say about how we can implement those in our classrooms and how we might be able to integrate them, as well as learning and understanding what that vision, mission, and beliefs are that really kind of support those best practices. Simultaneously, we'll have another group of teachers who are working in a committee to really, we'll look at our curriculum maps and in our content areas in English, language arts, math, and saying, well, where can we start to merge and integrate these skills into what we're teaching through our ELA curriculum, through our math curriculum, through our science curriculum as we move that way. One of the things we really learned as a committee was that the best way for us to implement these standards is really to integrate them and make them a part of what we're doing every day in terms of how we're teaching our content area.
Next is 118E, multi-level system of support, which is really supporting our administrators and our teachers in ensuring that they're providing a system of support for all students. Within that is a commitment to looking at the gifted program, which was identified by the Board of Education as a priority. Tim's talked a little bit about assessment, and Jen's going to talk a little bit further about this commitment.
Okay, so this commitment has had many pieces already in play. Dan mentioned one of them, which was the gifted, but also the moves that we made with the instructional assistants in the elementary and using them for a different type of support would also be part of this commitment. So right now the committee has developed a charge statement that really communicates the scope of the work, and the committee is in the process of forming and gathering the research. And we will have, and then the next thing is to really start looking at the current state of services and supports provided at all of the levels from elementary through high school. And then, and that work should be done by December of 2015. Then the future state, which again, many of the things that we're putting in place right now will already be part of that future state, should be identified by the end of this school year. And then we would begin the implementation of all of those supports in 17-18. And I'm going to let Tim, I don't know if Tim wants to provide any more information on gifted and where we are in that process.
Yeah, as part of this process, the what we see for our students is moving forward, we're going to see that students through the gifted identification process will see a more cognitive-based identification for our PI Plus process, and then a more content academic focus or weight given to the PI and the honors math. So if you look at the matrices that we use, what that basically says is that our gifted and talented program focused on PI Plus is really in that on that cognitive state, and then looking for things like creativity as how that might play into students who are outside of the normal thinking process. And whereas the honors math and the project idea courses are more of an honors class that take the students either at a faster rate or in more depth on that content and the normal curriculum.
Questions? Okay. 120A represents.
Kristen's got a question.
I'm sorry, Kristen.
Sorry, just to follow up. So do you expect, like, with the creativity to broaden that, then broaden the group that you would put in?
Yeah, and in terms of, we're going to see for the first time a matrix for the for our PI Plus program, and so the as we've looked through the Torrance has what's called a figural test that allows us to look at their creativity, and so what we see is that sometimes that's underused in looking at our PI Plus students, and the committee identified that as something that we'd like information on that. Now, the matrix will allow the students to gather points in other areas up to academic and cognitive, but this just adds a little extra dimension to it.
Okay. And one of the commitments in its early stages of implementation is 120A, labeled College and Career Readiness. The board identified as a priority ensuring that we have appropriate supports in place for all of our students as they begin their preparations for their steps beyond high school. And Christine is also leading this initiative.
We are in the beginning stages, as Mr. Bridges indicated, and we've got a planning committee that's really spent this past year looking at what is our current practices, how are we putting those counseling, what's happening currently at our high schools in regards to those counseling services, and then how can we reach out and understand what's happening in our junior highs. As we head into the upcoming year, we will really be taking a hard look at what is our current state, which we hope to which we will have identified by December of 2015, and then what is that future state. We've also begun to look at what does the research say around counseling programs and begin to align what are those national standards and how might we align those as well.
Envision a report to the board on that this year, or like sometime in the, maybe in the spring or something?
I think we'll have to see how kind of some of the early work. It would probably be more of the spring at the earliest, with some of the work just
It sounds
starting this fall.
fabulous, you know, it just, it sounds fabulous. It's
Yeah,
just-
we can look at an update perhaps later in the spring.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think when we get into the board planning calendar, those are the types of things we want to hear. Yeah, what have we talked about that you don't see on the calendar that you'd like reports on?
Okay.
So, yep, absolutely. Okay, 120B, junior high school program was identified by the Board of Education as a priority. Of all of our commitments, this is one that is impacted quite a bit by other commitments as well. Thus, it's positioning where it's at. So there's a lot of related work that impacts the junior high school program that has happened and is underway. Bob's going to lead this, or be the cabinet liaison and leader on this commitment, and I'll let him speak to work that's ongoing.
Thank you, Mr. Bridges. Yes, quite a bit has been done, and if you were following along in the blueprint book itself in the center column, many of the action steps are related to the things that are on the screen. So many of the things we've talked about, our Rising Star process, that has to do with junior high and improving all our schools. Our new English language arts and math curricula, those are very important in improving the rigor of the coursework that we offer, as is our new science curriculum, which will be coming down the line. All of our junior high principals, we'll have to make sure our new principal does as well, have been involved in leadership development concerning professional learning communities. We've expanded our summer school offerings. We've done some professional learning in support in blending learning and in DLI as we move toward that at the junior high level. The work on the restructuring of the school day and school year, that's commitment 318A. We will learn a lot from that will impact this, as we will especially, I think, from 116F, the one that Dr. Hester talked about earlier about online and blended learning. So all of those things will come together and help us as we work on 120B.
Bob, one thing I've asked before is, aren't we following the middle school format of what we do? Then why do we still call them junior highs? Why don't we just call it, I mean, why don't we call it what it is?
I don't know the answer to that.
Dan?
We do run, to answer your first
I've heard
part
a
your
lot of
question-
urban legend about why we call it what it is, but I guess I'm going to, and then I'll let you add to it. Nationally, the trend is really looking at middle-level education, and a lot of systems implement practices that are junior high school in practice, as well as middle school in practice. That's what I mean by that. We have instructional coordinators for department areas at the junior high school level, which would be more of a junior high model, as well as the teaming, which represents middle school. So I think it's really hard to just put a name on it other than middle level education. Bob, I didn't mean to step in, so I know you were going to say something.
No, that's it.
I mean, Don Weber always said we were too cheap to change the letters on the outside of the school.
That's one of the urban legend stories that I have heard, yes. You know, I think as the work on this commitment progresses, I'm sure that will, not become the focus of the work, but call it what it is.
I know that the timing has been impacted a lot by all these steps that had to come in, all these different curricular, strands that you're working through. I still do hear some concerns from parents, continued concerns about the big jump between the high school and the junior high. And, do you intend, once you get all these strands together, all the new curriculums, to look more in depth at just ensuring that the rigor is where we want it to make that step into the 9th grade?
Yeah, to get a good sense of the rigor, one of the important steps was the redesign of the curricula in both English language arts, math, and now upcoming with science, and potentially, as you'll see, a new issue, social sciences as well. So I think with the new standards in place, the new curriculum in place, we're beginning to address some of that. But I think we are transition, whether it be preschool to kindergarten, 5 to 6, 8 to 9 are important issues. I would be surprised if the work, as we move forward with this commitment, does not address transition issues. Correct.
Yeah, and I would go one step further in reading through the minutes of 2 years ago. We talked about it in a couple different ways. One was rigor, one was make it more robust, make those years count more. And just to be perfectly, blunt, because kids have such a big, so transition's great, but they're able to do more work in junior high.
Right.
I guess was the takeaway that I remember 2 years ago, and then also from reading the minutes. So, how we're going to balance those where we were 2 years ago, I'll be interested to see how the night progresses. But yeah, that was junior high was one of them.
Okay, next is 120C. The board, again, from a broad perspective, language learning was a priority identified by the Board of Education. World and classical languages was specifically identified through Future Focus 203. The cabinet liaison or the cabinet lead on this commitment is Jane, and so I'll let her update the board.
So this year, teachers have been trained on LinguaFolio, and you see that up there. And LinguaFolio is an online assessment portfolio for students. So that's something where students can upload evidence of their proficiency within the language and house artifacts. So that's something that's happening at our high schools, and we're also exploring that at our junior highs currently. In that second bullet, you see that ICs are collaborating with the dual language coordinator. It really is to create that course that Jen was talking about for ninth grade. So over the course of this year, there will be collaboration with also a representative from the junior high to create that ninth grade course for implementation next year. We are in the process of building consistency between the junior high and the high school so that our transition for our students into whether it be French 2 or Spanish 2 is smoother. And then this year we will be exploring the Illinois Seal of Biliteracy. And this is a seal that could possibly be granted to students who demonstrate high levels of proficiency in one or more languages in addition to English. So that's something that we're looking at right now, and we will have discussions with the ICs and also with building leadership at the high schools.
Jane, one of my questions has always been, how do we know that we're still teaching the right languages?
That's a good question. And we've had different discussions about bringing in other languages. And I think one thing that is that we track is our student enrollment and who's registering for these courses. And so that's telling us right now that we're on target, but we're also looking to expand. And we, Dr. Friebes-Flamen this year has talked about, do we start looking at different languages? Now we have to say, what is the need? And so we have to say, is our community asking for these languages as well?
But just because we offer it, I mean, they're just like, this sounds good, or my dad speaks this, or my mom learned this in high school. I still wonder if it's
more research-based.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Yep.
that would be great.
Yep.
Kristen?
Okay, just one other question. I wasn't sure whether this was a question for the multi-level system of support, but since I have a similar question about this, have we explored and do we ever intend to explore sort of that extra something for students who are interested in languages who are not in the dual language program? So we have such a wonderful program for the dual language students, and if they come in, they end up totally biliterate. But for the rest of our students who aren't in that program, their exposure is really junior high or high school. And we have these, riches with the ELO, in terms of potential ideas of, not making it a part. I mean, I think our days are too packed and all of our other things. I don't ever think that we would have that type of, idea. But at the same time, we have those other types of, potential resources online that students who were needing more challenges or were interested in world and classical languages could potentially look at something that would be like that.
Who wants to go?
We're looking at each other saying, who wants to go first? I think you had a key thing. One is we have to decide where that falls. Is it an approach that we're taking for world and classical languages? Or is it enrichment? Or is it an approach that we're doing as an extension of dual language? So I think once we answer those questions and find that priority, then we could move ahead with considering what we provide.
And just like some of the other commitments, we will be forming a committee, not this year, we're not looking at it this year, but most likely next year, to answer those questions and think about our pathways for students.
And I'm sure as you go, there's some urban legends on that, because in elementary it was 2 days a week for 18 minutes, or was it 18 minutes? Maybe it was 12. But it was kind of hard it wasn't it didn't work.
We'll take note of that.
I think it would be interesting, it dropped off. But does it need to drop off forever? I agree, we need to rethink it, but is there time in the day for it? No.
The beauty of what we have now is that it doesn't always have to be time of the day because we have these outside resources. So then it sort of, opens the question up to additional ideas.
Okay, we'll move to 120D. Driver's education was identified as a program for us to review during conversation during our July 2013 meeting when we talked about programs as a potential stop or review. And so we added it to the blueprint, and this is one that's really scheduled for most of its work later on. Bob, there's a couple of things that have been done that will impact this program, however.
Yes. You heard about driver education last month. Mr. Coffin talked to you about a fee waiver, talked about a waiver with the state of Illinois concerning fees for driver education. You may remember a couple years ago we came to you and you approved a waiver. It was re-upping a waiver that has to do with using simulators to satisfy some of the hours required by the state for the behind-the-wheel portion of driver education. So it comes up before the board from time to time for these other reasons. What we intend to do is to come forward with a recommendation about what our driver education program ought to look like. And we've got some work to do to get to the point where we'll be bringing anything to you. Work for this commitment is scheduled to begin in the spring of 2017. We'll be acting on waivers between now and then we'll come to you with something more solid at that time.
I had a question on this. Is there ever been thought of, I don't know how many resources, I don't know that you have the answers for this evening, but if you take the high school and you look at the students that are juniors or end of sophomore years, whenever they qualify to take this, more and more kids are taking this outside of school, I would believe. The numbers are growing to take it outside of school with private organizations only because they don't want to take up class time. It's expensive either way. The district's less money. I guess my question would be, we hear from the state that we're not going to get money for this and not going to get money for that. Is there ever been a thought to partner with the people that do this all the time and take it out of the schools? Total outsource it. And say, let's have somebody else do it. Let's have somebody else do it. State of Illinois, where it's insanity. We're getting less money. You're asking us to do all these things. This is something, there are others that are expert in this. I'm not going to turn over curriculum. I'm not turning over any part of our curriculum. But if there's, in its broad sense, but if there's pieces that are kind of outside our frame that can be taught, I can't think of another one. In high school, for example. The high school kids that go in and are into culinary arts and beauty school.
TCD.
Pardon me?
Technical.
Well, we don't try to teach that. We don't try to be so good at that. It's just an idea to think about it a little differently. Can we partner it? Can we get a waiver from the state to say we have five private companies that are wonderful that can do this, but we're spending pretty big resources, right? Teachers at I don't know, $80,000 a year teaching it.
I think that's a conversation worth exploring, but I will tell you that we are mandated by law to offer the program as part of our offerings.
Right.
The state says we have to offer it.
Right.
Whether or not partnering and referring students to an outside agency would meet the letter of the law, we'd have to spend some time looking at that.
Or I say, a number of my colleagues have always said, get our congressional people involved and say, hey, by the way, this is one thing. We have to chop off at it a little bit at a time. If this is the thing where we can look at FTE hours to be used for something else, to repurpose these teachers in something else, is this a proficiency that we hold that someone else doesn't? I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know for sure. But my own personal experience, I know a lot of kids that have taken outside driving and have been successful driving. So I think if we just say it's mandated,
Kristen?
Document, we have it under stop from 2 years ago. There's two things under stop, driver's ed and DES.
So we got one of them done.
Yeah. I'm just saying, I caught that when I was reviewing it.
Okay.
Dan.
Mike.
Actually, I was going to bring that point up too because I did happen to look at the school code on driver's ed, and in addition to the waivers we're talking about, it specifically mentions a waiver from the state to outsource the entire program. And so it's already accounted for in the school code in a similar process to that we're following right now. That's why, I'm a little disappointed on a couple of these things that they're still years and years away. And this one is something that I think, with the cost of the program, it's almost like I'd rather see that discussion a little bit earlier. So, as resources become tighter, it may make sense for us. I mean, there would be rules on, how it's paid for and stuff like that. But, I'm pretty sure we're doing this at a loss right now. So, we'd still have to cover reduced and free lunch, I'm sure. But we may still save a lot of money and free up resources. So that's something I would urge you to look at maybe in a little bit sooner than 2 years from now. So just a thought. And that's just one person, obviously. So.
I would like to suggest that it would be interesting to know if other districts, since it's in the school code, other districts have utilized that and what that looks like for them. And then I would think there needs to be a school day option, because in addition to students not taking it because they don't want to but they don't want to use the time, the class time. There are kids who take it during the day because they work in the afternoons or they have responsibilities after school, that having it after school is impossible. So, I mean, we'd have to acknowledge, ensure that it's available for all students during the school day or
You're absolutely right,
weekends.
Susan. But it's also on weekends. I happen to think a piece of that's going to be it's more expensive to take outside too. But it would be great to understand that.
I think as we look at options with our commitment to financial vigilance, you bring up a worthwhile point for us to explore further.
Well, and, as far as the cost, it's part of the research, obviously. But, if we have a contract with a provider, and we're looking at potentially in the future going up as high as $400, and they're charging $495, there are deals that can be made. And to Susan's point, I absolutely agree. But the point would be, it would be part of their schedule, but an outside provider would provide the instruction. So there's other issues we'd have to look at, CBAs and stuff. But
well, there's one that's probably as close to the high schools anyhow.
Yeah, especially in North. Okay, but just something for you to look at, I guess.
Okay, we are going to move to 220A, measurement of post-secondary achievement. Understanding how our graduates are doing as they move forward was a priority identified by both the board as well as our community during future focus. Tim.
We have, since 2010, been collecting data through surveys, using school perceptions, using a grad survey, a 2-year alumni survey, and then just this year we collected our first 5-year cohort survey. As fate would have it, that data arrived in my mailbox this afternoon at 1:30, so I haven't been able to look at it. For this last year, class of 2010's first cohort of a 5-year survey, so it'll be interesting to see how that looks. One of our next steps will be to create a format for getting that on the website as a report, rather than doing like annual reports to the board as part of that. The data is used by the high school and school improvement process. It is mission driven, and it's also career and course of study driven to analyze for our students. We did have an initial committee meet this past year in fall of 2014 to create that 5-year grad cohort survey, and then there will be another committee formed in the future to look at what other metrics we would use as part of that process.
Okay. We will move ahead to 418A and 420A. The final two that we have here, we'll turn both of these over to Michelle. They relate to the board's priority of focusing on community relations, communication, and engagement. Michelle?
Right. So far, it's been a year now, just about, since we launched our new logo and branding across the district. You'll see, if you look around the boardroom here, we have our signage up with our new color scheme, and our logo. We launched that after doing some focus groups of key stakeholders. And it was, a nod to our tradition. Here we kept the apple, we kept the globe stand, but we made it a little more modern and refreshed. So we like to call it not a new rebranding, but more of a facelift of the logo. I also mentioned we had launched the mobile app. We're also much more active on social media than we had been prior. We have quite a robust following, as we predicted when we had some weather episodes. Mr. Bridges has a whole group of fans that follow him now, and I no doubt that with the next weather episode, because we won't have any
fans.
Fans, sure, fair weather fans probably, but yes.
Actually, they're not fair weather fans.
Oh, they're poor weather. Okay. Inclement weather fans. Very good. We've also been using some hashtag media campaigns, and most of you will recall you've seen Celebrate 203. Pretty soon we'll have our new one, which has yet to be announced. We've had some pretty good success with that too, and we've been using that as a great tool to engage our community members, specifically some of the home and school families through Facebook. Our administrators in all of our schools are now on Twitter. Ms. Posey is now on it from North. We're getting all of our new principals up to speed on that, and we work with them on some strategies and how to best use that as a communication tool. We are constantly updating and adding multimedia content to our website. I think it was just mentioned earlier today, we have a nice story about how some of our students, current and former, have helped prepare Chromebooks for digital learning, and there is a video and a slideshow and a story right there on our front page. So it's nice. Check it out if you haven't seen it already. And we actually, I have a draft in right now of our strategic communication plan. It's being edited, and hopefully we'll have something to share soon for that. And part of that plan also is to come up with a editorial style guide for the district. Some things like how you mentioned junior high versus middle school. I don't know. Would that be something that's covered? We'll see. But just, the way that we how we call ourselves, certain acronyms, things like that. So we're all pretty much playing from the same playbook when it comes to communication. And I'm also evaluating an internal communication tool for district staff, as far as just don't want to go and start sending out just more emails. Everyone gets enough emails. What do you want? How do you want to get it? Is this something that people need? Working on a survey design for that right now, and hopefully be going through with that soon. Oh, sorry, last one.
Go right on 20, yep.
420A. So this is the continuation of everything we've put out in 418A, so we're going to continue our Focus 203 community engagement series or sessions. We're going to continue the biannual report to the community. So we did one last August of 2014, and we're going to be doing our next one in the 2016-17 school year. We are going to continue implementing our communication strategy as it's been outlined in the prior commitment I just discussed. We're going to be assessing and modifying our communication tools based on feedback from our stakeholders, as well as changing best practice. Things often evolve quickly, especially in the social media realm. We want to make sure that we're communicating in the spaces where our stakeholders are, and that continues to evolve, and we'll evolve right along there with it. And we're going to regularly assess our other communications tools and our community relations efficacy. And that's it.
Jackie?
Great, thank you so much.
Sure.
It's so exciting. It's exciting because, you don't want to feel like you're reacting, but getting out there and acting. And so it's very exciting. The 318A analysis of school day and year wasn't something that had Board of Education, but I don't know if publications have taken a liberal sense to always include us, but I've read a couple of times under the no surprises. I've thought, really, are we really in a big study with the whomever on the school day and school year? So I don't know if this needs to be under the Board of Education, or if truly you're not going to talk about it for 2 years, if it's an 18 thing. But I mean, I don't have any. I'm not suggesting you put it on your list sooner, but certainly the world thinks that 203 is doing something with this.
Yeah, I think that's when we get into the next, that's the conversation we want to have, is whoever's computer this is keeps getting emails, sorry, is where this fits in the priorities.
So
I'm
we should have
not
been
sure
keeping
where
track
the
of this?
author really came
Okay.
from that.
Okay.
It was, I'm not sure where he got that information when he wrote that article.
Yeah, I've seen it twice now.
Okay.
I'll go back and look at the other one, but after, once you see it once and it's not just kind of a copy and paste of something, like, two people. So anyhow, okay, thanks.
Well, actually, I was going to bring that up too, because You know, this is probably one more than any where, and we've talked about this offline, you know, I remember talking about this as a board. We talked to, 8 years ago, we talked with Alan Lease about it. Came up again with his, you know, with the last superintendent. And we talk about it, I mean, we're not even talking about it for 2 years, and then it takes 3 years to discuss it some more. Study after study show all the benefits for our students, which is why we're here. And it seems like we have trouble even getting our hands around what some of the options are. I mean, people will anecdotally say, oh, this is a problem for athletics, this is a problem for the bus schedule. But it seems like we just look at it and go, it's probably going to be a lot of work, I'm not going to mess with it. Whereas everything we've seen over the years shows that this is tremendously important for the health and well-being and social emotional health of our high school kids. And it just seems to me like it should be a higher priority. It really does.
As we move into new issues and priorities from the board, I'd welcome additional input on that, on whether that moves up, where that sits as a priority. I think, you know, I think it is something that would take quite a bit of work when it gets started. I think we're going to have to look at how it relates on other commitments and other work that we're doing.
Sure.
But I understand your point.
But
Jackie?
could it be as simple as, I'm probably oversimplifying it, there have been school districts that have done it, to at least have a conversation. How did it work? Did it really benefit? I mean, even though there's not hard research, school districts in other states have done it. But I just wonder, because, you know, I think, too, what do you do? The sun doesn't set later. What do you do with outside sports? Do the kids, are they not in them? Do you find inside space? Great for inside ones, but the ones that are outside in the fall, how does that work?
So I think that would be one thing that we'd have to do, is expand our scope in terms of conversation and talking
Right.
to other districts. Locally, there have been districts that have looked at it and not made changes.
Right.
But I think, you know, maybe through our Mid-States Benchmarking Consortium, we can talk to those districts about maybe what they're doing or what's happening in their states.
Right. Well, I think that, just as, instead of it just being inertia, I guess as one person, I'd say, let's look into it and at least understand if this timeline makes sense, or it needs to be moved up for the benefit of the kids.
Even just to do the analysis part, to move the timeline up for the analysis part, and then you know, because there's two parts of it: the
Right.
analysis, the decision making, and the implementation. Or I guess that's three parts. But the analysis part, if we push that forward a little bit, we'd have a little bit of a better idea what we're even talking about. 'Cause I think right now, to wait 3 years for even the analysis of it, it seems a long time.
Well, if I may, on 318A, the timeline calls for the work to begin in June of 2015, and it has. We were pleased on June 4th when we spoke with administrators about all of these commitments. I don't know if this is the one that had the greatest number, but it had to be close. We had 36 administrators say, I want to serve on that one. Mrs. Ryan and I have built out a plan. I do think to do this right, it's going to take quite a bit of time. We have a very well, I think, very well thought out plan of what happens in what order and who has to be involved and what the stakeholders are going to be asked to do. And the commitment reads, conduct a thorough analysis of how to best structure time in the school day and school year to maximize student learning and professional collaboration. So there's a lot to there. And the commitment is written, it's written EC12. It's not just a high school commitment. This is written for us to take a look at what we think needs to be done in those areas. Not that recommendations would necessarily be about all levels, but to take a look at all those. So I think we can certainly widen the scope. It's a pretty good scope already, and we are underway and moving forward.
Can I add to that? I think I appreciate that partnership with outside organizations. Several years ago, I talked to a board member from Barrington, and they had changed their schedule to have exams before the end of their semester, their first semester, and so the break was a total break. And they extended their second semester a little bit, but they scheduled it for 2 years out to give Boy Scouts and Little League and swim teams and the YMCA and all of the local groups time to adjust their schedules so that they could move as they wanted to over the summer, understanding that school was going to start earlier in August and end later in June, or earlier in June, so they would have to adjust their summer. And I thought that was really great because I know that had been an issue. I think those organizations have adjusted their schedule to ours, but they have 2 school districts to deal with. So they've got to balance that. Any kind of change like that, whether school year or school day, does affect outside organizations, and I think that we should work with them it'll be much less traumatic, any changes we make, if they get advance notice and they can make changes as well. So it's not just us. There's a lot of organizations that are affected as well. So I appreciate that time. I understand your urgency. As I look forward to my 17-year-old getting up again early in the morning and dread that, I appreciate that it could be later. But I think being planful about it is also healthy.
Even before that, you have to understand, is there an educational and an emotional benefit to it? I mean, everything we read there is, and maybe the scope, just a suggestion, because I think nothing about this, but is to break it down and silo it a little bit more. It's so big right now. I mean, when you look at E12, that's so big. Maybe there's a way of saying, let's just look at a piece of it at a time. I understand a lot. Maybe you'll
What
find
would the
out,
implications be if we chunked it out?
Right,
Like,
and maybe
impact on other parts of our operations.
Right, or your roundtables. I always say, the least expensive impact. The least expensive and less impact to everybody in an organization is just learn from other people that are doing it and find out. Maybe maybe the 40 minutes wasn't the greatest thing they thought it was going to be, and save us a lot of, or maybe it was. So.
Okay. One thing that we've shared with you is the blueprint itself represents a fluid document. Tonight represents an illustration of that, the importance of really revisiting what we're doing and what our priorities are. So one of the things that we are in the process of doing under Michelle's leadership is updating the draft binders that you had received just about 1 year ago now. So they'll be more current and updated and take on more of a branded look, similar to what we have throughout other areas. So I put one of them in here, the all-day kindergarten one, as just an example of what this will look like.
So on this new format, it looks like the action steps are already checked off as well, like the ones that
Action steps that have been completed.
Awesome.
Yes, not action steps that have not been completed.
I just had a quick question about one of the other ones that wasn't on the
Oh,
BOE
I'm sorry,
part.
sure.
No, that's okay. It was just to say that I'm glad that you're looking at the fee structure. We have looked at that in a variety of different, we talked about it in terms of fees covering our costs with DLI. We talked about it with driver's ed. I think it's good that you're taking a look at that whole, because it's not our only fees. We have a lot of fees, and looking at what other districts are doing and giving us that analysis, because it did come to mind to me in terms of that financial responsibility as well. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, what I would call the board's attention to now, which I think is an important part of identifying priorities, maybe of the work that is already scheduled and planned, is to turn to the Board of Education meeting tentative planning calendar. And Lynn, I guess maybe what I'd ask you to do is switch me over to the document in Board Docs that's titled 727 Planning Draft. So if we can move to that. You also have a copy available that you can look at on your screen through Board Docs. This again represents a draft. It's not necessarily locked in place. The things that were in red were things that have been added or changed since you had a draft copy earlier. What I've tried to do also here is make a connection to the priorities that are identified in the blueprint. There are two things in terms of requests that I've heard from members of the board that you'd hope for an update this year that are not on there right now. The first would be counseling. We talked about maybe looking at the commitment on college and career readiness that Christine is leading sometime later in the spring after some of the early commitment work. Is that an interest of the board to add that for a report? I think that's what I heard. I'm seeing some head nods. Okay, and then the closing the loop on the prototype furniture. My sense would be that would happen at the time when we do kind of a review of the facility improvements that we've done this summer, as well as looking ahead to the facility plan. And I was thinking that would be something that we may do on September 21st during one of our business meetings. It's not on there now. It hadn't been on there, but I wanted to get boards. I'm seeing. Okay.
And I don't think it has to be enormous, just kind of closing that feedback.
Just so people don't think there's trucks coming this summer that are going to drop off.
And some people would be happy, and some people would be concerned. So,
Right. I think as we get into new issues, changes in concerns about state funding and support are going to impact some of the decisions we make on these initiatives that are we would like to do's as opposed to we must do's. You've seen that I've added in here also a tentative schedule for policy first reads and second reads throughout. I went out of a little bit, well, I kept a big gap in there for Section 7. Made sense to me that annually we review two policies within Section 7, that we may look at the whole section in April, if you're okay with that. Otherwise, we can try to plug that away in the consistent order that we have with 4 in August, 5 in September, and 6 in October. You'll see that there's some question about when some data might be available from the state, and then based on when data becomes available, we'll jockey a couple of those reports for you. I'd call to your attention when you go through the consent agenda, some of our annual or multi-year contracts for services and vendors are listed on when those will be brought before you. So I'll try to make sure that if there's a contract coming up, I remind you of that so that if you have an opinion you'd like to provide some input on, we can. As you'll see in new issues, there's a couple of things that we're going to have to add in there. Well, I did add it in there, actually. I forget the date. Maybe in my draft I don't have it. But I think I added food service in there. In my print copy, I don't have it. I have an old one. So it'd be helpful if I looked at the current one. So the food service, we would come in February with really kind of, we can do some incremental updates along the way of the work we're doing to review our status in the food service program. But by February, we talk about a recommendation, have some, and then come back for action. You see our consistent reporting, or schedule of reporting on schools on the school improvement plans. The budget timeline is also in here. So what I would ask from the board, are there reports or topics that you don't see on here that you would like to talk about adding?
I have a question about one of your topics. I see early in the in September you're talking about health insurance and benefits, and that's something that we've talked about a little bit in terms of kind of what percentage of our rising costs are we're paying and what our employees contributing, that kind of looking at that maybe historically. I know we've talked a little bit about that. I know I wasn't sure where it really comes in. You have ACA under new issues. I wasn't sure if it was something that you're thinking of, tracking something for ACA, or if you are, as a part of that health insurance and benefits, you would look a little bit at that, or if that would be sort of a separate discussion.
I don't anticipate that we would do that in September. I think that would be a separate discussion that would come later.
Okay.
Jackie?
I don't know that I'm prepared for entirely what needs to go on the planning calendar. I have something I was keeping track of the last couple of years. One, I know we've talked about closed session minutes and what we're going to do, and to talk about that many months in advance. So I want just to give everyone enough time to talk. So those types of things.
What I did for this report, the closed session topics are somewhat kind of fluid, so I took that out for planning. But I have that on the closed session planning for us. I think in about September we're due for the semi-annual review in October. So I've put it in as a closed session topic as allowed by the Open Meetings Act in September, to really get some guidance and thoughts from the board.
And I had a couple of others like that. I just don't have them with me. I would like to just ask my colleagues, do you want to look at driver's ed as just something we'll talk about in the fall to find out what information you found? I mean, I don't...
for things that might be priority, let's look at when we get into the new issues. I would see that. If you hold that...
I'm sorry, what are we doing now? We're looking at the planning calendar.
Right.
But we're not looking at what we had 2 years ago. I'm sorry, okay, go ahead.
Okay.
So you said that we would put the mid-level, did you mention that, the multi-level system of support, you said we'd get a report in the spring. Do you want to add that on the?
I can do that, yep.
Somebody said we would be doing a report in the spring on that.
What college counseling?
I thought that was the college counseling. Yeah, I have the college counseling. That's the one I remember. I mean, we can look at some of the material or some of the action that we're doing within the multi-level system of support as well, and see where it fits for a report and update. There's a lot of work going on there.
Some of the survey results too as well. The kindergarten and the athletics survey.
That's right. Okay. Do we have? In report, you should have an enrollment update on October 19th.
Is that going to be from?
What we'll do on October 19th is we'll have current data updated based on the September 30 enrollment.
And what about feedback from the consultant?
What feedback from the consultant?
If the consultant's going to update the consultant takes some of the data and update.
The system, yes, Dr. Coffin, the system that he's built for us, when we enter that data, that updates that.
I know Tim said earlier when we were talking about the graduate surveys, I thought he said that, now that we got 2 and 5 years, we're going to start doing annual reports. Did I hear that correctly, or?
I'm going to work on a format to put on the website instead of reports. We had previously done annual reports, so we're going to put some of the data on the website.
Is there a plan to, I mean, that's great, but is there a plan to also talk about it during a board meeting?
We can do that. We don't have it scheduled right now, but that's something that we.
I mean, I think that would be within our.
Yep.
So that would be useful.
We'll look at that. Well, we'd be prepared to do that. Okay. Lynn, now if we can go back to the PowerPoint. And this may also impact the board planning calendar. But as we said, there are things that are going to change, or outside forces or internal forces that are going to impact the work that we do. So briefly, some of the things that we've identified that are going to really be priorities of work for the administration, or potential priorities of work, are listed on the slide here that were not identified specifically, other than the first bullet point for the ongoing financial vigilance. Long-term finances are certainly going to be something that we're going to have to pay very close attention to and be very vigilant with. In the 2 years since we had a discussion about priorities, there have been a number of changes talk about changes to school funding, actions by the state legislature that may impact our funding, and even recently discussion about Title I federal funding that could impact us. So we're really going to have to focus on our finances long term, and that goes along with the ongoing conversation we've had regarding investment strategies as well. The Affordable Care Act and open enrollment has had an impact on our daily operations, at least as we get into the time for open enrollment time, and the amount of work that it takes to get, now that we're annually offering the open enrollment. So we're going to have to focus there, as well as expenses that come with that. There continue to be a series of legal mandates that come from the General Assembly that could impact us. Things that make sense, for example, carbon monoxide detectors within a certain number of feet of carbon emitting device things in our schools, but those things come with a cost. So that's an example of things that we're going to have to keep an eye on. We've mentioned food services. Social studies standards, we expect, do we have a sense of when those might come? Or the timeline yet? But you want to give the board a quick update on that?
Right now, those social studies standards have been presented. They have not been formally approved, and so we're kind of waiting on that. It can happen anytime. The civics and consumer economics is on there as well. We know that there is going to be the civics new course, and what we have to decide is, do we need to change our American government? We know we may have to look at some curricular changes, but the big question is, are we going to have to change the name of that course to make that mandate? And then consumer economics, that's just some upgrade to make sure that we're in compliance with Illinois School Code.
And as we heard from earlier tonight, the assessment conversation is ongoing. There'll be changes to PARC implementation this year, and then the likelihood of the addition of a science assessment. So those are all things that will impact both time, the tools and resources that we have available, as well as technology, and impact our work. So the question before that I'd ask for the board now, are there additional priorities that are not identified now, new issues that you'd like to bring forward for us to talk about, or is there a desire on any of the priorities we've identified for reprioritization or discussion in that manner? So I'd leave the floor open to the board, and Susan raised her hand.
So in the past, we've talked about IB versus AP. I would love to kind of look at that again and decide what's best for our students and what direction, and other things that may have anything new that's out there that we could maybe be cutting edge or leading edge on.
The response to that?
I think that it has been talked about before. I don't know that it was talked about at our last meeting, our last planning meeting. I didn't see it in the minutes, but I think it's always good to, if we're going to, it's a different structure, I understand, and it takes resources, but talking about getting our kids ready, it's a very well-regarded program, IB. International Baccalaureate program. So certainly, let's make a conscious decision, or have our administrators put forth, understand that it's a conscious decision that we're not doing it. And there are a number of school districts that do dual programs, because you can a la carte AP where you can't a la carte IB.
Right.
And I just had a couple, and I'm not sure. One, in the new issues on long-term finances, I guess that's so big. I would like, of course, there's long-term finances that are out of our control. I would like a subcategory of, what we're doing with our own finances, just so we keep it. They're both very important, but the other things on here really might have subcategories. I just thought that might be helpful, because we certainly can't do much out of our control. And the other question I had, are we going to go through what we did 2 years ago? Like, for example, something that I just wanted to make sure we had put on the start was individual goal setting for each student. And I just want to make sure that these planning sessions aren't just 3 or 4 hours of people's time. We don't look at it again. Let's just make it conscious decision. And there's a number of things. I don't know where it fits into your plan to go back over the things that we put into the stop, start, and continue category.
Right. So that was one activity that was within that planning session.
Right.
And then the focus of what ended up being the board priorities was a document that looked like this.
Right.
That we identified. It was identified in the minutes. Some things ended up in the blueprint as well. But that's one, for example, that did end up that was identified during our conversation on the Saturday as the priorities. It was identified through conversation as something for us to either start or look at. But when we came back the next day and identified priorities, that one wasn't identified.
Okay, because I know, like, policy discussion, to get together with legislators, that was discussed.
Some things happened, yeah. One example of...
It got so, it was such a priority, it didn't even make this list.
Yeah.
We just planned it.
One of the things that has come through that particular topic is the digital learner profile, the individual goal setting.
Right.
And so one of the places we're starting to pilot that is through the digital learning profile for our summer school program.
Okay, so I guess what you're saying, like where we had here, stop DES, stop driver's education, the stops were there? Do you know?
Let's see, so if I'm going to pull that sheet up.
I just never want to, we all spent a lot of time on that, and I want to make sure everyone's thoughts.
So the continue, I think science curriculum is hit, community engagement is hit, with the vertical articulation. In our curriculum, we've done that through the implementation of new curriculum. Junior high school's on the plan. Science, magnet programs are identified. Differentiation we hit through the culturally responsive practices, professional learning that we talked about. Summer school business partnerships we've talked about. Note there that we talked about looking at some programs that may not be needed because of all-day kindergarten, dual language. Hopefully we're getting there with more robust conversation. Better model for emerging sports and activities would be the activities and athletics plans of study. Drivers in DS we hit, diversity we hit, college and
So
career.
is that one we have talked about, or is that something?
Which one?
The better modeling for emerging sports activities, show choir.
We really
lacrosse.
took it as more of a broad perspective on the athletics and activities plan, the continuous improvement
I
plan
guess
for
I'm
those
saying
departments.
if this is just an open planning meeting, I'd like to understand how we're going to get show choir at Central. I mean, if we're just throwing out ideas, it's such a phenomenal program at North. I don't know what everybody else thinks. What are our steps to get it at our sister school?
Right.
Okay. Is this what we're trying to do? I'm sorry.
It's what we're looking for right now. Are
okay.
there new priorities that have emerged? Priorities that you don't think we've hit?
Okay.
Priorities that have identified and we have a timeline on them on where you'd like us.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. Kristen.
Were you raising your hand too? Okay. I think I just heard my colleague say, and I just want to clarify, that you said you would like to see a subcategory when we're looking at financial responsibility towards our own finances. Totally agree. We didn't really, you've talked a lot about how our budgets went 0.18 or whatever. what's the future for that? How are we getting there? And, some of these other things that we've talked about, the fees, the health insurance costs, whatever it is, maybe those all go in that bucket of, what are the things that we need to be talking about?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
we didn't put it there. I think it was implied that we would be doing that.
Okay.
But I think it's
I'm just
exactly.
saying.
I
think I heard that. I agree with
Yep,
it.
I agree.
Okay. Second thing, I went back and talked and looked at our immediate, short-term, long-term, and one of our heartfelt statements was student achievement and achievement gaps. And we just haven't heard very much about it. There was one sentence about the intentional and deliberate effort to close achievement gaps, but I would like to hear more about that at the board level. So maybe on your calendar that there's something, we hear about it when we hear our test results, and and that's one part of it. But with the SIPs, when it's kind of getting funneled to that, the SIPs are a whole school, and we can hear little kinds of things, but I would like to hear a broader discussion of how are we doing on this? What are the intentional and deliberate steps? And are they taking impact in getting us where we want to go? Because that was something that was an immediate priority for the board.
Okay.
What are we going to call that? Just so I don't lose it.
Achieving gaps. Mm-hmm.
Do you have something, Mike?
No, I'm saying achievement gap. I agree with it because I noticed that too. It was an immediate priority, and we talked about it as in conjunction with other stuff sometimes. But,
Yeah, we've talked about how to be a little bit more explicit with it. That's come up a few times during conversations that we've either had as part of my goals and direction by the board. So we'll expect to see that.
Well, I think it's integrated in things like our summer school program. I mean, when you talk about, we're happy to see the number of low-income students or free and reduced lunch students who are participating, and the reason we've got busing for those kids, and the reason we've got, so it's sort of integrated in certain things, doesn't need to be pulled out. It sounds like it needs to be pulled out as its own. This is how we're addressing it. These are the things that we're doing.
And we've done some of that with our liaison work with Rising Star, the conversations we have with the principals about that. At DLT, in the context of Rising Star, it comes up, and even calling out specific tasks and identifying with the principals, which of these tasks do you identify as ones that you believe will explicitly work to close the achievement gap? We've had all of those conversations throughout this year alone.
What are your gaps? How do you know they're your gaps, and what are you doing to close those gaps? So I think what I'm hearing is how do we make it more of a board conversation? Other areas?
I have one. I know you're going to do a facilities report, and White's done the legwork on it, but the energy aspect of the buildings and what they consume, I mean that's a whole separate study. And just to play, I know the buildings that White has done for us, they put in LED light fixtures. These up here are pretty old, and they would burn probably 20 to 30 times the amount of energy of the new fixtures that we're putting. And some of our additions and so forth, you multiply that by 20 buildings, it runs into money at some point. The other thing to look at would be the age of the chillers. And are the chillers the most energy efficient? I know that we put more money towards utility expenditures in last year's budget, but I think either hiring someone on a competitive basis or at least going out for a competitive RFP to find out how we could reduce our energy consumption. Not that we don't do a good job in-house, but bring in some other experts that would help us reduce across the board.
We've been having those conversations with a couple of vendors, and we have a pilot in place at a couple of schools. So we'll look at that a little bit more in depth. Other areas.
So I see that the digital learning initiative is on the calendar for October, but I almost would like to see it again towards the end of the year after we've had an opportunity to see how it's been used, and whether it be in May or June. I think that I'd love to hear how it kicked off, but I'd more importantly like to hear how it's going.
That's a great idea. Yeah. Okay, so what I have for additional board reports will be a focus on counseling, tie the prototype furniture into a conversation on facilities, look at how we can update more on some of the work we're doing in the multi-level system of support, kindergarten survey, athletic survey, grad survey, DLI in the spring. And board members have identified taking a look at how might we address IB, International Baccalaureate, and AP, advanced placement. Finances, ensure that we're focusing in on more of a local level rather than just in terms of the broad category. Think about what we're doing locally with our dollars.
I just meant internally. My point was, funding is one thing, whether it's local, regional,
Yeah.
whatever, but also what are we doing
Correct.
as a district financially?
Right.
Oh.
Yep. I'm sorry if I said funny. Yeah, finances. Okay. Oh, okay. Not on a local. That's where I think. Yeah, when I said local level, you're thinking that's not what I meant. What are we doing? Yeah, yeah.
Internal.
Internal. That's
Yeah.
the better word. That's the better word. Maybe more in depth about other activities that we're looking and how are they coming on. More intentional conversation with the board about achievement gaps. And energy gaps. Consider how we look at energy aspects, and then DLI in the spring. Donna?
This might be more of a July, August of 2016, but I'd like to see what we just did here. That June 2016 is when we're going to come to the first sort of not deadline, but the first
milestone.
Thank you. That's a better way to say it. And so we've gotten a lot of updates on these, but there's still a lot of progress, and some of them are done, and that's great. But there's still some work to be done on some of those, and so I think another update after the June,
Maybe July, maybe the July meeting,
or
the
even
year ends.
August.
Yeah.
I mean, or as you see fit, but somehow to wrap up where we're at with the June 2016 goals.
Well, now you've said that, before we scheduled the planning meeting, I had put a Focus 2020 update on September 21st. Do you feel like we've accomplished that? And we don't need to revisit that, so we can remove that then from the agenda? Okay.
I think to go a step further, the richness of this group, this would be a wonderful thing. This is what I call a work session. And this is what we used to have years ago, where we don't have to have a special meeting, but
Right.
put this on the calendar and we get a sense who's doing it, who's in charge of it. We put a name with a face as opposed to just a formal presentation. I think it's really beneficial, but I look at this more as a work session. As the planning was kind of the nitty gritty. Hey, a smaller group, a little different flavor. But I think the richness of this is wonderful.
And that was on our refresh, the robust discussion in the work
Yep.
sessions.
Mhm.
So there we go.
Others?
So to beat a dead horse, where did driver's ed go on your list to said wait for that for
Oh,
later?
driver's ed. So that's what we have. What you haven't told me is there's a couple of things that driver's ed, look at where that is on timeline, and then the school day and school year.
We did talk also about the healthcare, and you said it wouldn't be a part of this, but whether that's a part of that financial discussion or whether it's its own.
Healthcare expenses.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
What I heard from a number of my colleagues, and I think Bob too, on the school day, school year, is that we've started to work on that, right? And then maybe what we need to do is, if we're targeting 2018 as a date to implement, we need to finish the work. I'm going to ditto what Susan said. We need to finish the work on that much sooner so that we give the community a significant amount of time. So even though we have a 3-year timeline, I think pushing that to a 1-year timeline with some decision making, or a year and a half, or whatever you guys see fit, with some decision making, so that when we make a decision, we give the community enough time to be able to
Your premise is that there's
respond.
going to be a change.
Such
No, that there won't be a change.
There might not be a change, but we need to anticipate either way, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, I just,
No, I'm not promising that there's a change, just that if there is, we need to allow time for that implementation.
Oh, I totally agree with
to
that,
occur.
but we would need to update the community even if there wasn't a change. I don't know. I see what you're saying.
Yeah, I think we do have to update the community even if there isn't a change, because there's so much research out there that's I mean, we've had community members sending us research on that for like 2 years. I've had different
Okay, I
people.
see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was just,
Needs to be
I was looking at their 18 timeframe a little differently, so, I mean, I can't communicate enough, so.
And I just want the community interest in that. Bob, the committee that you're on, do you have enough as a general outline to do a brief community report on how you're approaching it yet, or is it still too early in the process? Just
Honestly, I think it's too early in the process.
Okay.
I mean, in all truth, anything we do on that, it has to go through the contract, right? So
That's exactly right.
It's like
There are
there's
some contractual implications.
There's these kinds of.
That's correct. Right.
All right. Anything else from anybody? Mike? Anything more, Jackie?
Oh, I would just like to thank you wonderful people for coming tonight. Thank you so much. I know this was on your agenda not too long ago, so thank you for spending your dual Monday nights are all in a row with us, so thank you.
And we echo that, the rest of us. Thank you.
So that's how I was going to conclude as well. I hope the board can see that this administrative team is really hard at work. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of powerful, positive things that are happening. So thanks to this cabinet team and everything that you do every day to make this district a better district. So that's all we have for the evening.
Okay, well, it's also evident that you're very well prepared, and you took the time, and I think whatever questions the board asked, you guys were able to put a solid answer into it, even if it wasn't on your agenda, so it's commendable. And I sincerely appreciate your time tonight and what you did, and maybe next time we can have some treats or something.
We actually talked about making everybody, doing a buffet, having everybody bring something, so I just want you to, say thank you that we didn't go through with that.
Special shout out to Bob, who's actually on vacation.
Bob.
Bob, what else would you be doing? Wouldn't you look like this?
Congratulations, by the way, to Mr. and Mrs. Ross, not Bob and Sherry, but the patriarch and matriarch on their 50th wedding anniversary this weekend.
Congratulations.
Wow. They've had 36 good years. That's what my mother-in-law said. Sorry. No, they've had 50 good years. I know. There you go. I'll just take my foot out of my mouth.
Okay, with that, we'll have a motion to adjourn. Motion second. All in favor? Aye. We are adjourned.